I walked into the office after my 3-day regional meeting feeling lighter than I had in months. The quarterly numbers were excellent. Our project deadlines had all been met, and I'd even managed to secure additional budget for team training. The moment I stepped off the elevator, something felt wrong. The usual Monday morning buzz was missing from our department floor. The East Wing corridor where my team of 7 brilliant engineers worked was eerily quiet. "Finola?" I called out, looking for our lead developer who was always first to arrive. No answer. Our workspace, the one we'd earned after delivering 3 consecutive breakthrough projects, stood empty. Desks cleared, monitors gone. Even the potted plants we'd nurtured were missing. Only rectangular dust outlines remained where our equipment had been. I spotted Loxley from accounting walking past. "Hey, what happened to my team?" "Oh." His expression shifted to something resembling pity. "You should check the basement. They moved them yesterday." "The basement?" "We didn't even have office space in the basement." The elevator ride down felt eternal. Each floor passing by heightened my dread. When the doors opened, I had to navigate through storage areas and maintenance rooms before finding a door with a hastily printed sign, "Engineering Team B." I pushed it open to find my team huddled between exposed pipes and utility boxes. Their monitors balanced precariously on folding tables. Extension cords snaked across the concrete floor. Water dripped from a ceiling pipe, landing with rhythmic plunks into a bucket near Finola's makeshift desk. "What happened?" I asked, though their downcast faces told me everything. Finola looked up, her eyes burning with humiliation. "While you were gone, Dieter came down with movers. Said we needed to relocate immediately to make room for the new specialist. We had 30 minutes to pack everything." "A specialist? What specialist?" "Some productivity expert," Ren, our youngest developer, added. "Dieter says he's going to revolutionize the whole department." I climbed back upstairs to our former workspace. MRA, bright, airy, strategically positioned between the testing lab and design team. Now it housed a single person, a young man arranging framed certificates on what used to be my desk, while Dieter, our department head of 5 months, hovered nearby with an expression of unbridled admiration. "Ah, there you are," Dieter exclaimed when he spotted me. "Meet Bastian, our new productivity transformation specialist." His revolutionary approach increased output 300% at his last 3 companies. He needs proper space to implement his vision. He lowered his voice. "Your team can manage downstairs until next quarter's budget review." I stared at Bastian, who didn't even pause arranging his awards to acknowledge me. I nodded silently and returned to the basement where my team waited, the distant hum of industrial machinery vibrating through the walls. The Wi-Fi signal barely reached. The nearest bathroom was a single toilet behind a shower curtain. The air smelled of mildew and defeat. 32 years with this company," muttered Vega, our hardware specialist, "and this is how they treat us." I surveyed their dejected faces, people who had given everything to this company, who had pulled countless all-nighters to meet impossible deadlines, now stuffed in a basement like unwanted furniture. Then I smiled calmly. "Pack your bags," I said. "Not just for down here. Everything." They stared, confused but trusting. I held their gaze, my smile never wavering. "Trust me. Just start quietly gathering everything you might want to take with you someday, and keep this conversation between us." If you're enjoying this story so far, please tap that like button and subscribe for more workplace revenge stories that will leave you breathless. I'd love to hear in the comments if you've ever been undervalued at work. My name is Thea Moretti, and until that basement moment, I'd been the loyal, dependable leader of Engineering Team B for 8 years. Before joining the company, I'd spent 15 years coordinating refugee camp logistics during humanitarian crises across 3 continents. The company had hired me for my technical knowledge, unaware that I'd spent those years building global industry relationships while setting up supply chains in impossible conditions. I wasn't just good at solving technical problems, I excelled at solving human ones. When I transitioned to corporate life, I brought those skills with me. I could spot talent in unlikely places and build cohesion among wildly different personalities. Each member of my team had been handpicked not just for their technical brilliance, but for their ability to solve problems under extreme pressure. Finola, our lead developer, had been rejected by 3 other companies because of her unfiltered communication style before I recognized her genius with complex systems. Ren, fresh out of college but with natural talent for finding elegant solutions, had been passed over for higher-profile graduates. Vega had been ready to retire when I convinced him his hardware expertise was irreplaceable. Then there was Dax, our quietest member who spoke 5 programming languages but struggled with human ones. Kyrie, whose testing protocols had become industry standard. Indra, whose security systems were impenetrable. And Noor, who could translate technical requirements into language anyone could understand. For 8 years, we delivered consistently excellent results without fanfare. We weren't the flashiest team, but executives knew we were the ones to call when they needed something impossible done reliably. 6 months earlier, our longtime department head retired, and Dieter arrived with grand ambitions but zero understanding of our work. From day one, he'd been hunting for a game changer to impress executives, ignoring our consistent results in favor of flashy innovations. His golden hire, Bastian, had dazzled him with buzzword-filled presentations and promises of revolutionary methods. What Dieter never investigated was why someone with such transformative skills changed jobs 3 times in 2 years. For 2 weeks after the basement relocation, we worked from our exile. The conditions were abysmal. The temperature fluctuated wildly. The lighting gave everyone headaches, and twice we had to cover equipment during overhead pipe leaks. Yet my team followed my quiet instructions: archive projects, organize knowledge bases, create transition guides, while continuing their assigned tasks without complaint. "I don't understand why we're documenting everything so meticulously," Dax whispered one afternoon. "It's not like they appreciate our work anyway. Everything we do should be done with integrity," I replied, loud enough for everyone to hear. "No matter where we do it." The others exchanged glances but kept working. They trusted me, even if they didn't understand. Then came a surprising call from Yvain, the CEO, requesting I present our team's accomplishments at the upcoming board meeting. My team's spirits lifted. Finally, recognition. The morning of the presentation, I dressed in my best outfit and carefully reviewed my slides in the basement's dim light. As I climbed the stairs to the executive floor, Dieter intercepted me in the stairwell. "Change of plans," he smirked, blocking my path. "The board wants to hear about future innovations, not past performance. Bastian will present instead." But Yvain specifically requested. "I spoke with her this morning. She agrees my approach makes more sense." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "The board needs to hear about where we're going, not where we've been. You can go back to your workspace." My team deflated when I returned with the news. Our youngest member, Ren, glanced at her half-written resignation letter visible on her screen. "So this is it? We're just giving up?" "Not yet," I replied, my voice steady. "Keep packing quietly." Later that day, word spread through the company grapevine that Bastian's presentation had bombed spectacularly. Board members had asked technical questions he couldn't answer, exposing his shallow understanding of our core business. Dieter attempted damage control by promising our team would implement the concepts, despite their reluctance to embrace change. That afternoon, Dieter visited our basement, suddenly friendly. "Good news. We're considering moving you back upstairs, to the East Wing." The East Wing, slightly better than the basement, but still a clear demotion from our original space. The message was clear. We were still less valuable than the golden hire. "Thank you for recognizing our value," I said, surprising my confused team who expected outright rejection. Hope flickered again. That evening, Ren admitted she'd torn up her resignation letter. "If we're moving back upstairs, maybe things will improve." I merely nodded, saying nothing to confirm or deny her optimism. 2 days later, I invited an old colleague to tour our facility. As we walked through departments, I deliberately timed our arrival at the executive floor for when I knew Dieter would be showing Bastian around to potential clients. "Thea," Dieter called out, too loudly, too friendly. "Perfect timing. Come meet Grayscale Solutions executive team. They're interested in Bastian's productivity system." I approached with my visitor in tow. "This is my colleague, Talia." Dieter eagerly introduced Talia to Bastian, who launched into his rehearsed transformation speech. "Fascinating approach. Talia said when he finished. You've used this successfully elsewhere? Absolutely. My methods boosted efficiency dramatically at my previous companies. Northwest Technologies saw a 300% productivity increase in just 1 quarter. Strange, she replied, her voice cool and measured. I sit on the board of Northwest Technologies. We never recorded such improvements. In fact, we noted significant project delays during your tenure there. The conference room went silent. Bastian's confident smile faltered. There must be some confusion, Dieter began, his face flushing. No confusion, I interjected. Talia's here because I accepted her job offer yesterday. I'm bringing my team to establish a new engineering division at her company. We start next Monday. The grayscale executives shifted uncomfortably. Bastian's confident smile vanished completely. You can't take your team, Dieter sputtered. That's poaching. It's unethical. But completely legal, I finished for him. Check our contracts. No non-compete clauses. You relocated us to a basement with leaking pipes while focusing resources on unproven methods. Talia is offering us double our current salaries and proper working conditions. The board will never. The board approved it yesterday, Talia added, after reviewing your division's performance metrics against industry standards. Dieter's face cycled through shock, anger, and fear in rapid succession. The grayscale executives began gathering their things, making excuses to leave. Wait, Dieter's voice cracked slightly. The East Wing renovation starts tomorrow. I'll match their salary offers. I looked at him with the same calm smile I'd worn since finding my team in the basement. Too late, I said. The executives from Grayscale filed out, followed by Talia, who said she'd wait for me in the lobby. When only Dieter, Bastian, and I remained in the room, Dieter turned on me. Do you have any idea what you've done? He hissed. I've secured my team's future, I replied. Something you failed to do. You've destroyed mine, he said, his voice breaking. The board was already questioning Bastian's hiring. If your entire team leaves, you chose him over us, I said simply. Actions have consequences. As I turned to leave, Dieter grabbed my arm. Please, I made a mistake. I see that now. What will it take for you to stay? I looked at his hand until he released me. You know what's interesting about my refugee camp work? I said quietly. I learned that true character reveals itself not when things are going well, but in how people treat others when resources are scarce. You showed us exactly who you are when you put us in that basement. I walked out, leaving Dieter standing there with his golden hire, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the empty conference room. What I didn't tell him was that my plan had been in motion long before the basement incident, and that what he'd just witnessed was only the beginning. Back in the basement, my team waited anxiously. When I returned, their expressions ranged from hopeful to terrified. Well? Finola asked, unable to contain herself any longer. I closed the door behind me and surveyed the room, checking for any potential listening devices, a habit from my humanitarian crisis days. It's done. Talia offered us all positions, double our current salaries, proper equipment, and a real office with windows. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Ren let out a whoop that echoed off the concrete walls. Are you serious? Vega asked, his weathered face struggling between disbelief and hope. Completely, I confirmed. Contracts are being drawn up as we speak. We start next Monday. The celebration that followed was as muted as it was emotional. Hugs exchanged, tears wiped away discreetly. These weren't just colleagues. They were people who had become family through late nights, impossible deadlines, and shared successes. I knew you wouldn't leave us in this basement forever, Noor said, squeezing my hand. But how did you pull this off so quickly? I hesitated. It wasn't quick. I've been laying groundwork for months. Their faces registered confusion. Months? Indra asked. But the basement thing just happened 2 weeks ago. I sat on the edge of a folding table. The basement was just the final straw. I saw where things were heading the day Dieter arrived and started talking about fresh perspectives while ignoring our track record. So you've been planning our escape all this time? Kiri asked. Not exactly an escape, I corrected. More like an insurance policy. I started documenting everything, our contributions, Dieter's dismissals, project successes he took credit for. I reached out to old contacts, including Talia, just to reconnect. When things started deteriorating, those connections became more important. Dax, always the most perceptive despite his social awkwardness, studied my face. There's more to this than just finding us new jobs, isn't there? The others turned to me expectantly. Let's focus on the transition for now, I said carefully. We have 1 week to wrap things up properly. No loose ends, no unfinished projects. We leave with our professional reputations intact. What about Dieter? Finola asked, a dangerous edge to her voice. Does he know we're all leaving? He does, I confirmed, and he's panicking. The board was already questioning Bastian's hiring and the resources allocated to him. Losing an entire specialized team in one stroke is going to raise serious concerns about Dieter's leadership. Good, Vega muttered. 32 years, and he sticks me in a basement. What's our strategy for the next week? Indra asked, ever the pragmatist. We work. Professionally, thoroughly, and without complaint, I said. We document everything meticulously. We prepare transition guides for our replacements. We act with complete integrity. Why? Ren asked, her youth making her the most direct. Why help them after how they treated us? Because this isn't about them, I explained. It's about us, about who we are. And because the best revenge isn't what you do to others, it's what you build for yourself while they're not paying attention. The team exchanged glances, not fully understanding but trusting me nonetheless. There's something else you should know, I added. Talia isn't just offering us jobs. She's creating an entirely new division with us as the core team. We'll have autonomy to build something from the ground up. This revelation shifted the mood from cautious celebration to genuine excitement. Even Vega, who had been contemplating retirement before the basement incident, straightened with newfound energy. What are we waiting for? He asked. Let's finish our work here so we can start our real work there. For the next 3 days, we operated with mechanical precision. Every line of code was commented, every process documented, every system mapped. We worked longer hours than necessary, our impending freedom fueling our productivity. On the 4th day, Dieter appeared in our basement, looking haggard. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his typically immaculate shirt was wrinkled. Thea, can we talk privately? He asked, his voice lacking its usual confidence. I glanced at my team, who pretended to be absorbed in their work while obviously straining to hear. Anything you need to say can be said here. We don't have secrets. He shifted uncomfortably. I've spoken with the executive team. They've authorized me to offer your entire team a 15% raise, effective immediately. We're also expediting the renovation of the East Wing. You could be back upstairs by next week. I noticed he didn't mention what would happen to Bastian. That's very generous, I said, but we've already signed contracts with Talia. Contracts can be broken, he pressed. I'm sure there are clauses. One. There aren't, I interrupted. Talia's legal team made sure of that. Dieter's professional veneer cracked slightly. Please, Thea. I admit I made a mistake with the basement situation, but this is going to destroy my career. The board meeting is on Friday, and if I have to announce that our entire engineering team resigned, for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The basement wasn't a mistake, Dieter. It was a revelation. It showed us exactly how much you valued our contribution. I kept my voice level. You chose Bastian's empty promises over our proven results. Now you have to live with that choice. He left without another word, shoulders slumped in defeat. The moment the door closed, my team erupted in whispered exclamations. Did you see his face? Kyrie marveled. 15%, Dax murmured. That's substantially less than double. It's not about the money, Finola said sharply. It's about respect. I let them talk, turning back to my computer to hide my expression. What they didn't know, what I couldn't tell them yet, was that Dieter's desperation was exactly what I had been counting on. That evening, as we were preparing to leave, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Yvain, the CEO. I stepped into the hallway to take the call. Thea, she began without preamble. I just heard the news from Dieter. Is it true your entire team has resigned? Yes, I confirmed. We've accepted positions elsewhere. A long pause. I'd like to meet with you tomorrow morning. Just you, not your team. 9 o'clock in my office. I'll be there, I agreed, then hung up. When I returned to the basement, 7 pairs of eyes locked onto me. The CEO? Finola guessed. What did she want? A meeting tomorrow morning, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Are they going to try to stop us from leaving? Ren asked, worry creasing her forehead. They can't, I assured her. Our contracts are solid. This is probably just an exit interview. But as I said it, I knew it was much more than that. Yvain wasn't the type to conduct exit interviews personally. Whatever she wanted would complicate my carefully constructed plan, for better or worse. I slept poorly that night, rehearsing scenarios in my head. By morning, I had prepared for every possibility except the one that actually occurred. Yvain's office occupied the corner of the top floor, with glass walls offering a panoramic view of the city. She sat behind a minimalist desk, reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed documents. When I entered, she removed her glasses and gestured to the chair across from her. Thea, she said, her tone unreadable. I appreciate you coming. Of course, I replied, taking the seat. She studied me for a moment. I've been reviewing your team's contributions over the past 5 years. Impressive work, consistently delivered with minimal resources. Thank you. My team is exceptional. Yes, she agreed, which makes me wonder why they're all leaving simultaneously. The basement relocation seems insufficient as an explanation. I maintained eye contact. It wasn't just the basement, it was what the basement represented. Explain. When Dieter moved us downstairs to make room for Bastian, he sent a clear message about our value to the company. The basement was just the physical manifestation of how he, and by extension, the company, viewed our worth. Yvain leaned back. And you think I share this view? With respect, I said carefully, you approved Bastian's hiring and the resources allocated to him, despite no proven track record. So yes, I assumed you endorsed Dieter's approach. To my surprise, she laughed, a short, sharp sound. Dieter convinced the board, not me. I was outvoted. And now I get to say, I told you so at tomorrow's meeting. Her expression sobered. But losing your team is too high a price for being right. She slid a folder across the desk. This is what I'm prepared to offer to keep your team here. Not under Dieter, reporting directly to me. I opened the folder and scanned the document inside. The terms were exceptional, better even than Talia's offer. Autonomy, resources, recognition, and compensation that reflected our true value. For the first time since this all began, I felt my resolve waver. This was everything we deserved, everything I had wanted for my team before Dieter arrived. Why now? I asked, closing the folder. Why not 6 months ago? Politics, she said simply. The board wanted to give Dieter a chance to implement his vision. I couldn't undermine him openly, but this situation changes things. You're using our resignation to consolidate power, I observed. She didn't deny it. Mutual benefit, Thea. You get what your team deserves. I get to restructure without internal warfare. I need to discuss this with my team, I said, taking the folder. Of course. But I need an answer by end of day. The board meets tomorrow. As I stood to leave, she added, there's something else you should know. Talia and I have history. This isn't the first time she's recruited from us after disagreements. The implication hung in the air. Was I being used as a pawn in some corporate chess game between Yvain and Talia? I returned to the basement, mind racing. My team looked up expectantly. What happened? Finola asked. I held up the folder. Yvain wants us to stay. New department, reporting directly to her. Better terms than Talia's offer. The stunned silence was broken by Vega. She's trying to save face. Maybe, I acknowledged. Or maybe she's sincere. Either way, we need to discuss this. What followed was the most honest conversation we'd ever had as a team. Fears were voiced, hopes articulated, trust questioned. The basement's dim lighting seemed fitting for the shadows we were exploring in our professional lives. I don't trust them, Indra said firmly. They only value us now that we're leaving. But building something new here, with real support, Kiri countered. We wouldn't have to start over somewhere else. Ren looked torn. What about our word to Talia? We signed contracts. With exit clauses, I reminded her. Legally, we could accept Yvain's offer. Dax, who had been quiet throughout, finally spoke. This decision isn't about what's best for us professionally. It's about what we can live with personally. All eyes turned to me. What do you think, Thea? You've led us this far. I took a deep breath. This was the moment that would determine everything, not just our careers, but the culmination of the plan I'd been crafting for months. The plan that had evolved from simple self-preservation to something much more complex. I think, I said slowly, that we should split up. Their faces registered shock. Not permanently, I clarified. Strategically, 4 of us accept Yvain's offer. 3 go with Talia as planned. We maintain our connections, share information, and protect ourselves from being vulnerable to any single employer again. The silence that followed was profound. Then Finola began to laugh. That's absolutely brilliant, she said. We become our own network. Neither company can take us for granted again. The tension broke as the team began discussing how this might work. Who would go where, how we'd coordinate, the potential advantages of having inside perspectives at 2 major companies. As they talked, I slipped away to make 2 phone calls. The first to Yvain, the second to Talia. Both conversations were challenging, but by their conclusion, I had secured what we needed. When I returned, the team had reached consensus on who would stay and who would go. I've spoken to both Yvain and Talia, I announced. They've agreed to our split approach with one condition: regular collaboration between the 2 teams on select projects. They're actually excited about the possibility. And which group will you lead? Noor asked the question everyone was thinking. I smiled. Neither. I'll be consulting for both teams, dividing my time, building bridges rather than choosing sides. The relief in the room was palpable. We'd found a solution that honored everyone's needs while creating something entirely new, a team that transcended organizational boundaries. As we celebrated our unconventional solution, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Board meeting moved up to tomorrow, 9 a.m. Dieter presenting restructuring plan. Bastian featured prominently. Thought you should know. A friend. I stared at the message, my mind rapidly recalculating. This changed everything and nothing. The final phase of my plan would need to happen sooner than expected, but the outcome might be even better than I'd hoped. Change of plans, I announced, interrupting the celebration. We need to prepare for tomorrow's board meeting. Why? Vega asked. We've made our decision. Because, I said, tomorrow isn't just about our future. It's about making sure everyone understands exactly why we're leaving and what they're losing. As I outlined what we needed to do, I saw understanding dawn on their faces. This wasn't just about finding better jobs or escaping a bad situation. This was about changing the system that had devalued us in the first place. By midnight, we had everything prepared. As we finally left the basement, possibly for the last time, Ren asked the question I'd been waiting for. Thea, how long have you really been planning this? All of this? I looked at my team, my brilliant, loyal team, who had trusted me through basement offices and uncertain futures. They deserved the truth, or at least part of it. Since the day Dieter introduced Bastian as the future of the department, I admitted. But what's happening tomorrow? That part I've been planning much longer. What exactly is happening tomorrow? Finola pressed. Justice, I replied simply. And I need you all to trust me one more time. As they nodded their agreement, I felt a surge of something powerful. Not just the satisfaction of a plan coming together, but the absolute certainty that what we were about to do was right. Not just for us, but for every overlooked team, every undervalued contributor, every person who had ever been relocated to a metaphorical basement to make room for someone flashier but less substantial. Tomorrow would change everything, and no one, not even my team, knew exactly how. Morning arrived with a pale light filtering through the basement's tiny windows. I arrived before anyone else, dressed in the charcoal suit I reserved for the most important client presentations. As my team arrived one by one, each looked surprised to see me already there, calmly preparing materials. Ready for today? Finola asked, setting down her bag. More than ready, I replied, handing her a sealed envelope. When the time comes, you'll know what to do with this. The others received similar envelopes, each with specific instructions. They tucked them away without questions, the ultimate demonstration of trust. At 8:30, we made our way to the executive floor. The boardroom doors remained closed. Executives and board members likely already inside discussing matters before the official meeting. My team and I waited in the adjacent room, an uncomfortable silence hanging between us. "Shouldn't we be in there?" Ren whispered, gesturing toward the boardroom. "We weren't invited," I explained, "but don't worry, we will be." At precisely 8:55, Yvain's assistant approached us. "The CEO requests Engineering Team B join the meeting." My team exchanged nervous glances as we gathered our materials and followed her into the boardroom. The long mahogany table was surrounded by board members in expensive suits, with Yvain at the head. Dieter sat halfway down, papers spread before him, with Bastian beside him looking uncharacteristically subdued. Dieter's eyes widened when he saw us enter. He leaned over to whisper something to Bastian, whose complexion paled considerably. "Thank you for joining us," Yvain said, gesturing to the empty chairs on the opposite side of the table. "I've asked Thea and her team to provide context for some of the proposals we're discussing today." As we took our seats, I noticed a familiar face among the board members. Talia sat 3 seats down from Yvain, offering me a slight nod. "Now, Dieter," Yvain continued, "you were about to present your departmental restructuring plan?" Dieter stood, straightening his tie nervously. "Yes, as you know, our department is undergoing significant transformation to align with market demands. The centerpiece of this transformation is our new productivity methodology, pioneered by Bastian, which promises to revolutionize our workflow." He clicked through several slides showing colorful charts with impressive upward trends. "Initial implementation has begun, and we project a 200% productivity increase by year-end." "Impressive," one board member commented. "And what about the existing engineering team? How are they adapting to these new methodologies?" Dieter hesitated, glancing at us. "There have been some resistance to change, as expected with any transformation. But we're addressing that through gradual implementation and appropriate resource allocation." "Resource allocation," Yvain repeated. "Could you elaborate on that, Dieter?" He shifted uncomfortably. "We've had to prioritize certain workspace considerations to maximize efficiency. Some temporary relocation was necessary." "By temporary relocation, do you mean moving an entire specialized engineering team to the basement?" Yvain asked, her voice deceptively mild. The board members stirred, several frowning as they looked between Dieter and our team. "It was an interim solution," Dieter insisted. "The renovation plans for proper workspace are already underway." "I see," Yvain said. "And these renovations began after you learned the team was resigning, correct?" Dieter's face flushed. "The timing was—" "Thea," Yvain interrupted, turning to me. "Perhaps you could give the board your perspective?" I stood, feeling the weight of every gaze in the room. "Thank you, Yvain. Before I begin, I want to clarify that what I'm about to share isn't about personal grievances. It's about systematic issues that threaten this company's future." I turned to my team. "Now, please." They each opened their envelopes and distributed documents to every person at the table. Dieter received his copy last, his hand trembling slightly as he took it. "What you're looking at," I explained, "is a comprehensive analysis of our department's productivity over the past 5 years, alongside financial allocations and resource distribution. The final pages show projected outcomes based on current management decisions." The board members flipped through the meticulously prepared documents, their expressions growing increasingly concerned. "These numbers can't be right," one board member said, pointing to a particular section. "This shows a projected 30% decline in deliverables under the new structure." "The numbers are accurate," I confirmed. "They're based on the department's own data, accessed through our project management systems. This indicates the team relocated to the basement was responsible for 78% of the department's successful deliverables last year." Another board member noted, looking up sharply. "Dieter, were you aware of this?" Before Dieter could respond, I continued. "What you may find most interesting is on page 12, the background check my team conducted on Bastian." Bastian jumped to his feet. "That's private information. You had no right." Every bit of information there is publicly available. I cut in calmly, including court records from the wrongful termination lawsuit at your previous company and the class action settlement from the company before that. The room went silent as everyone turned to those pages. Bastian slowly sank back into his chair. You'll note, I continued, that Bastian's revolutionary methodology has been implemented at 3 companies. All 3 experienced initial enthusiasm followed by significant productivity declines. 2 of those companies no longer exist. The third laid off 40% of their workforce last quarter. Dieter's face had gone from red to ashen. I wasn't aware. No, you weren't, I agreed, because you didn't do proper due diligence. You were so focused on finding a game changer that you ignored both warning signs and the consistent results your existing team was delivering. I turned to address the entire board. This isn't just about my team being relocated to a basement. It's about a management approach that values flash over substance, that chases quick wins at the expense of sustainable growth. It's about decision-making that ignores data in favor of charisma. The silence that followed was profound. Even Yvain seemed taken aback by the thoroughness of our presentation. Finally, the board chair spoke. Yvain mentioned your team has received offers elsewhere. Given what you've shown us, I'm not surprised. But I'm curious, why bring this to us now, when you're already leaving? I smiled, because I care about this company, despite recent events, and because my team and I have proposed an alternative structure that would benefit everyone. I nodded to Noor, who distributed a second set of documents. This proposal suggests splitting our team between continuing here and joining Talia's company, with collaborative projects between the 2. It provides stability during transition, maintains crucial institutional knowledge, and creates a partnership that could strengthen both companies. Talia spoke up for the first time. I've reviewed this proposal and fully support it. This arrangement would be unprecedented in our industry and potentially revolutionary. The board chair studied the proposal, then looked at Dieter. And where do you fit in this new structure? Before Dieter could respond, I answered. That's for the board to decide. Our proposal requires new leadership for the remaining team, someone who values substance over style. The board chair nodded slowly, then turned to Dieter. I think we need to continue this discussion privately. Thea, thank you for your candor. Would you and your team give us the room? As we gathered our things to leave, Dieter finally found his voice. This is a setup, he hissed. You've been planning this for months. I met his gaze steadily. No, Dieter. You set this up the moment you decided my team belonged in a basement. I simply made sure everyone understood the consequences of that decision. 3 hours later, my team and I sat in a local restaurant, celebrating with Talia as my phone buzzed with a message from Yvain. Dieter and Bastian are gone. Board approved your proposal. When can you start as department director? I showed the message to my team, whose cheers drew curious glances from other diners. I quickly typed my response. Monday. Half-time, as agreed. Other half with Talia's team. So that was your plan all along? Finola asked, her eyes wide with realization. Not just to leave, but to completely restructure both companies and take Dieter's position? Not exactly, I admitted. The original plan was simply to secure our team's future. But when I saw how deeply flawed the system was, I realized we had an opportunity to fix it, not just for us, but for everyone who might come after us. And splitting the team between companies? Vega asked. Insurance, I explained. No single employer will ever have complete leverage over us again. We'll always have options. Ren raised her glass. To basements, then. Without them, none of this would have happened. We all laughed and clinked glasses. As conversation flowed around me, I thought about how sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies, but building something better from the rubble of their mistakes. 6 months later, our unprecedented arrangement had become a case study in industry publications. The collaborative model between formerly competing companies had increased innovation while reducing burnout. Both companies' stock prices had risen significantly. As for Dieter and Bastian, last I heard, Dieter was working at a much smaller company in a reduced role. Bastian had reinvented himself as a workplace culture consultant, still chasing the next opportunity to sell empty promises. And my team? No longer in any basement. We occupied bright, airy offices in both companies. Our worth finally recognized not just in words but in actions. More importantly, we'd created a new model that valued substance over style, consistency over charisma, and respect over hierarchy. The most satisfying revenge isn't what you do to those who wronged you. It's creating a world where what they did to you becomes impossible for them to do to anyone else. If you've ever been undervalued at work or pushed aside for someone with a flashier approach, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear how you handled it. And if you enjoyed this story of workplace justice, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of people who turned professional lemons into leadership lemonade. Loser. The neon green sticky note glared back at me from my computer monitor. 5 sets of eyes watched from behind cubicle walls, waiting for my reaction. Their quiet snickers filled the suddenly silent office space. I stood frozen, my morning coffee still warm in my hand, as my gaze moved from the childish block letters to their expectant faces. This wasn't the first time, just the most public, the most blatant. I placed my mug down with deliberate calm, peeled the note off with 2 fingers, and dropped it into my trash bin. Then I smoothed my skirt, sat down at my desk, and began typing as if nothing had happened. But inside, something shifted. Not broke, shifted, like tectonic plates beneath the Earth's surface before a quake. I could feel Trevor watching me from his office, the ringleader disappointed by my non-reaction. Beside him stood Audrey, his devoted second-in-command, whispering something that made him smile. Dylan and Penny pretended to work while stealing glances my way. Even Milo, the newest member of their little club, hovered nearby, eager to prove his loyalty to the established hierarchy. 6 months of this treatment, and they still expected tears. They wanted a scene, validation that their tactics worked, that I was as pathetic as they'd decided. What they didn't know was that I'd stopped keeping track of their childish pranks weeks ago and started documenting something far more interesting. Something that would change everything. The office printer hummed to life, spitting out pages I hadn't authorized. I didn't need to check to know what it was. Another joke. Probably my resume plastered with unflattering comments or a mock performance review. Audrey giggled as she collected the papers, passing them around like party favors. I continued typing, my fingers never pausing on the keyboard. What no one realized as they exchanged knowing glances was that my screen displayed not the quarterly report I was supposed to be finishing, but an email addressed to someone they had never met, someone whose name would strike terror into their hearts within 48 hours. I only needed to press send. Wait, before I continue with what happened next, and trust me, you'll want to hear every detail of how this unfolds. If you're enjoying this story of workplace revenge, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more stories that'll have you cheering for justice. Drop a comment letting me know if you've ever dealt with office bullies and how you handled it. Now, let's get back to what happened after I found that looser sign. My name is Valerie, not Val, never Val, Valerie Warden, the analytics specialist who arrived 6 months ago when Centrix acquired this regional branch. I was 29, single by choice, and transferred here with a specific assignment: evaluate operational efficiency and recommend improvements. What nobody told me was that I'd be entering a hornet's nest of territorial employees led by a manager who saw me as nothing more than a corporate spy. I grew up as the middle child between 2 loud, demanding siblings, which taught me to observe more than speak. This quiet watchfulness became my superpower. People tend to underestimate those who don't constantly broadcast their thoughts. They forget you're there, forget you're listening, forget you're connecting dots they didn't even realize existed. Before the acquisition, this office operated like a separate kingdom. Trevor, the regional manager, had built his team over 8 years with people who were loyal to him personally rather than to the company. They had their routines, their inside jokes, their unspoken rules. Then I arrived, an unwelcome reminder that they were now answerable to a larger entity. The exclusion began immediately. Meeting invitations mysteriously failed to reach my inbox. Crucial information was shared during impromptu gatherings by the coffee machine just after I'd left for lunch. My suggestions in team meetings were met with silence, then attributed to someone else minutes later to enthusiastic approval. I tried the standard approaches at first. I brought donuts on Fridays. I complimented their work. I stayed late to help with deadline crunches. Nothing broke through the invisible barrier. If anything, my efforts seemed to amuse them. Further evidence of my desperation to belong. "She's trying so hard," I overheard Penny say one afternoon. "It's kind of sad." The day I stopped trying to win their approval was the day I truly began to see them, not as potential friends or even colleagues, but as subjects of observation. I started noticing patterns, discrepancies between reported numbers and actual results, client complaints that vanished without resolution, projects marked complete that hadn't delivered promised outcomes. At first, I thought it was just inefficiency, the kind of departmental laziness that develops when no one's watching closely. But 3 months in, I spotted something that made me pay closer attention. 2 different versions of the same report, with numbers that didn't match. "Just a draft," Trevor explained when I casually mentioned it. "Always double-check with me before using any reports for your analysis." His smile didn't reach his eyes. That night, I began keeping separate notes, not about their social slights, but about these discrepancies. I worked later than everyone else, giving me access to files they thought no one would examine. I volunteered for administrative tasks they considered beneath them, which gave me legitimate reasons to access systems they thought were their private domain. Meanwhile, the bullying escalated. My presentation slides were altered minutes before client meetings. My name was removed from project contributions. Someone changed my desktop wallpaper to an unflattering photo they'd taken when I was eating lunch alone. The breaking point should have been the day Trevor took credit for my cost-saving proposal. I'd spent weeks developing it, analyzing 3 years of operational data to identify unnecessary expenditures. I'd submitted it directly to him as required. When the quarterly review came, he presented it as his own work, with one crucial difference. My projected savings of $2.3 million had been downsized to $800,000. "We don't want corporate setting unrealistic expectations," he told me afterward, noticing my surprise. "I did you a favor. Better to underpromise and overdeliver." But I knew the real reason. The full amount would have raised questions about why these inefficiencies had persisted under his management for so long. I said nothing. I smiled and thanked him for the advice. And that night, I added this incident to my growing file. By the morning of the Loser sign, my documentation had become substantial. I hadn't planned to act on it yet. I needed more conclusive evidence for certain patterns I'd observed. But something about that green sticky note, the culmination of months of petty cruelty, crystallized my resolve. They thought they knew me. They thought I was weak because I didn't fight back. They had confused patience with passivity, observation with obliviousness. During lunch, when they all went out together as usual, I stayed behind. I organized my findings into a clear, dispassionate analysis, focusing on 3 key areas: systematic misreporting of performance metrics, inconsistent client billing practices, and what appeared to be deliberate obstruction of post-acquisition integration efforts. I wrote the email carefully, addressing it to Helena Cruz, Chief Operations Officer at Centrix's headquarters. I had never met her, but I knew her reputation for zero tolerance of operational inefficiency. My message was professional, factual, and completely devoid of personal grievance. I included spreadsheets with highlighted discrepancies, screenshots of altered reports, and a timeline of integration obstacles I'd encountered. I ended with, "I believe these issues reflect intentional dysfunction rather than mere incompetence. I've developed a recovery strategy that could salvage the division's potential value to Centrix. I'm available at your convenience to discuss further details." My finger hovered over the send button. Once I crossed this line, there would be no going back. These people had made my professional life miserable for months. But was I really prepared for what might happen next? As I contemplated my decision, Trevor emerged from his office, walking toward my desk with that familiar, condescending smile. Over his shoulder, I could see Audrey watching with anticipation. Something new was coming my way. "Valerie," he said, leaning against my desk uninvited. "The team and I were talking. We're concerned that you seem unhappy here. Maybe this position isn't the right fit for your particular skills." Translation: They were planning to push me out. "Actually," I replied, meeting his gaze directly, "I've been thinking the same thing. This arrangement doesn't seem to be working as intended." Relief flashed across his face. "I'm glad we're on the same page. I can talk to HR about finding you a different placement within Centrix, somewhere more suitable." "That's thoughtful of you," I said, my hand moving to my mouse. "But I've already taken initiative on finding a solution." I clicked send. "What does that mean?" Trevor asked, his smile faltering slightly. I looked up at him with a smile of my own. It means I'm finally participating in the company culture you've created here. I'm being proactive about improving our situation. He left my desk confused rather than concerned. He had no reason to worry, not yet, but within 24 hours, that would change dramatically. I packed up at exactly 5 o'clock, nodding politely to the team as I left. They watched me go with the satisfied expressions of predators who believe their prey is weakening. What they didn't realize was that prey, when cornered, can become surprisingly dangerous. And I was no longer cornered. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with an incoming email. The subject line made my heart skip. Operational concerns at Western Regional Branch. I opened it, standing perfectly still in the parking lot as I read Helena's 3-line response. Valerie, extremely concerning information. Do not discuss with anyone on site. I'll be there tomorrow with the audit team. Continue as normal. Delete this email after reading. I looked back at the office building, where lights still burned on our floor. They had no idea what was coming, and neither did I. The next morning, I arrived early, 7:15 a.m., well before anyone else typically showed up. I wanted time to prepare myself mentally for whatever the day might bring. The office was eerily quiet, the overhead lights not yet fully activated by motion sensors. I moved through the dim space to my desk, feeling strangely calm despite the storm I knew was approaching. I powered up my computer and began my normal routine. By 8:30, Dylan arrived, barely glancing my way as he settled at his desk. Penny and Milo came in together at 8:45, whispering and stopping abruptly when they saw me. Audrey strutted in at 9 sharp, coffee in hand, giving me a once-over before disappearing into Trevor's office. She's acting weird today, I heard Penny murmur to Milo. Too quiet. Probably planning her resignation letter, Milo replied with a snort. If they only knew what I was actually planning. Absolutely nothing. The wheels were already in motion, and I simply needed to wait. At 10:17 a.m., Trevor's phone rang. I watched through his glass office partition as he answered, his expression shifting from professional pleasantness to confusion, then unmistakable alarm. He stood up abruptly, pacing as he spoke, running his hand through his hair repeatedly. When he hung up, he immediately called Audrey in. Their conversation was animated but hushed. Audrey's normally confident posture crumpled slightly as Trevor spoke. She kept shaking her head, then nodding vigorously. When she emerged, her complexion had paled considerably. Everything okay? Dylan called out to her. Fine, she snapped, uncharacteristically sharp. Just corporate stuff, nothing important. But her trembling hands told a different story as she furiously typed at her computer. By lunchtime, the atmosphere had grown tense. The usual group lunch was canceled without explanation. Instead, Trevor called an impromptu team meeting, excluding me. I ate my sandwich at my desk, watching them through the glass walls of the conference room. Trevor spoke intensely, occasionally pointing at documents spread across the table. The others leaned forward, their expressions growing increasingly distressed. Penny appeared to be on the verge of tears. Milo kept shaking his head in disbelief. Dylan stared blankly at the wall, his face ashen. Only Audrey maintained some composure, taking furious notes and occasionally interrupting Trevor with questions or comments. At 2:43 p.m., the elevator doors opened, and 3 people stepped onto our floor. A tall woman in her 50s with silver-streaked dark hair led the group, flanked by 2 men carrying sleek briefcases. I recognized her immediately from the company website, Helena Cruz, Chief Operations Officer of Centrix. The entire office fell silent. Helena's gaze swept the room before landing on me. She walked directly to my desk, her heels clicking sharply against the laminate flooring. Valerie Warden? She asked, though it was clear she knew exactly who I was. Yes, I replied, standing to greet her. I'm Helena Cruz. These are Michael Berg and Jason Winters from our audit team. Is there somewhere private we can speak? Trevor emerged from his office so quickly he nearly tripped. Miss Cruz, what an unexpected pleasure. I'm Trevor Stark, Regional Manager. We weren't notified of your visit. I would have prepared. That was intentional, Mr. Stark. Helena cut him off without even turning to look at him. We'll need your conference room. Immediately. Of course, Trevor stammered, gesturing toward the room where his team still sat, now staring wide-eyed at the corporate delegation. Just give us a moment to clear out. Actually, Helena said, finally turning to acknowledge him, you'll stay right where you are. We'll be speaking with Ms. Warden first. Alone. The look Trevor gave me could have cut glass. Confusion, suspicion, and the first flickers of fear competed for dominance in his expression. Helena led me to a small meeting room at the opposite end of the floor. Once inside, with the door firmly closed, she turned to me with an intensity that was almost physical. "Your email contained some extremely serious allegations," she said without preamble. "Before we proceed, I need to know if you stand by everything you reported." "Every word," I replied steadily. "And you understand the implications? This could result in terminations, possibly legal action." "I understand." She studied me for a long moment. "Most people in your position would have complained about workplace harassment. Your email didn't mention a single personal grievance." "Because this isn't about me," I said. "It's about systematic misconduct that's costing the company millions." A hint of approval flashed across her face. "Walk me through it, everything you've observed." For the next hour, I presented my findings to Helena and the auditors. I showed them the pattern of misrepresented performance metrics, AS, how the regional branch reported a 23% growth in client retention, when the actual number was closer to 7%. I demonstrated how certain operational costs were being concealed through creative accounting. Most significantly, I revealed evidence suggesting that Trevor had deliberately sabotaged integration efforts to maintain autonomy from Centric's oversight. "And this cost-saving proposal," Michael Berg said, reviewing one of my spreadsheets, "you're claiming potential savings of $2.3 million annually, but the proposal submitted to headquarters projected only $800,000. "Yes," I confirmed. "The original analysis was mine. The numbers were altered before submission." Helena leaned forward. "Can you prove that?" I pulled out my personal tablet. "I keep backups of all my work. This is the original document with metadata showing creation date and authorship." As they reviewed my evidence, comparing it to official records, their expressions grew increasingly grave. Jason Winters whispered something to Helena, who nodded sharply. "We've seen enough for now," she said finally. "Ms. Warden, we'll need you to remain available, but return to your desk. Act normally. Say nothing about this meeting to anyone." When I emerged from the room, 5 pairs of eyes tracked my movement back to my desk. Trevor immediately approached Helena as she exited, his smile strained and artificial. "Miss Cruz, now that you've spoken with Valerie, perhaps we could discuss whatever concerns brought you here today." "Certainly, Mr. Stark," Helena replied coolly. "Your entire team, conference room, 5 minutes." As Trevor gathered his team, Audrey brushed past my desk, leaning down as if retrieving something she'd dropped. "What did you tell them?" she hissed, her voice barely audible. I looked up from my computer screen, meeting her gaze directly. The truth. The color drained from her face. "What truth?" "The one in the numbers," I replied simply, returning my attention to my screen. For the next 3 hours, Helena and the auditors remained closed in the conference room with Trevor and his team. Occasionally, raised voices penetrated the glass walls, though the words remained indistinct. Twice, Trevor emerged to retrieve files from his office, his movements jerky with tension, his face increasingly drawn. At 6:12 p.m., the conference room door opened. The team filed out, their expressions a mixture of shock, anger, and fear. Trevor remained seated, his head in his hands. Helena approached my desk once more. "We'll need you to come in early tomorrow, 7:30 a.m. We have more questions." I nodded. "I'll be here." As Helena and the auditors departed, an oppressive silence fell over the office. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Then, slowly, Dylan approached my desk. "You did this," he said, his voice flat with disbelief. "You reported us." "I reported discrepancies in our operational data," I corrected him. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Penny joined him, her voice breaking. "They're talking about an entire departmental audit, possible fraud investigations." "That sounds like a company decision based on their findings," I replied evenly. Milo stood nearby, shaking his head. "We were just having a little fun with you. The sign was just a joke." "What sign?" I asked, genuinely confused for a moment before realizing. "Oh, you mean the Loser note? I never mentioned that to anyone." Their faces registered collective shock as the implications sank in. This wasn't about their bullying at all. This was about their work, their actual professional conduct. Audrey approached last, her arms crossed defensively. "Trevor built this team from nothing. 8 years of his life dedicated to this branch. We've been family. Families don't lie to each other," I said quietly. or steal from each other, or sabotage each other's work. We never stole anything, she protested, misrepresenting performance metrics to secure bonuses you haven't earned, concealing operational inefficiencies to avoid oversight, taking credit for others' work while altering their findings. What would you call it? She had no answer. I packed up my things and stood to leave. As I walked toward the elevator, Trevor finally emerged from the conference room. He looked decades older than he had that morning. Valerie, he called after me, his voice ragged. Wait, I paused, turning to face him. Whatever they offered you, promotion, bonus, transfer, I can match it. Better yet, I can make things very comfortable for you here. No more misunderstandings. You'll be a valued team member. I promise. There it was, the bargaining phase. I almost felt sorry for him. It's not about what I want, Trevor. It's about what you did. They'll dismantle everything, he said, desperation creeping into his voice. Years of work, gone. People will lose their jobs. Is that what you want? What I want, I replied carefully, is a workplace where performance is measured honestly, where credit is given where it's due, and where integration with the parent company isn't viewed as an invasion to be repelled. That's all I've ever wanted. I left him standing there, surrounded by his crumbling kingdom. That night, my phone rang continuously. Trevor, Audrey, even Penny. I let each call go to voicemail, listening to their increasingly desperate messages. Threats gave way to pleas, then to bargaining, and finally to outright begging. Please, Audrey's final message trembled. Just tell us what you want. We can fix this. But they couldn't fix this. Not anymore. I slept surprisingly well that night, better than I had in months. Whatever happened next, I had done what needed to be done. The truth was out, and now it would have its day. Morning arrived with a clarity I hadn't experienced since before my transfer. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple black dress that had always given me confidence. Today would determine not just my future with Centrix, but potentially the future of the entire regional branch. I arrived at the office at exactly 7:30 a.m. Helena was already there, along with a new face, a distinguished older man in an impeccable suit, whom I recognized immediately as Edward Barstow, CEO of Centrix. Ms. Warden, he greeted me, extending his hand. I've heard a great deal about you in the last 12 hours. Sir, I replied, shaking his hand firmly. Let's talk in private, he suggested, gesturing toward Trevor's office. As we settled into the space, Edward leaned back in Trevor's chair, studying me intently. Helena tells me you discovered discrepancies that our quarterly audits somehow missed for nearly 3 years. That's quite remarkable. I had the advantage of being an outsider, I explained, and of being underestimated. He nodded thoughtfully. Tell me, why didn't you mention the hostile work environment you've been enduring? Helena says there's clear evidence of targeted exclusion and harassment. I considered my answer carefully, because that would have made it personal. This isn't about how they treated me. It's about how they've been operating this branch. A smile spread across his face. That's exactly what Helena said you'd say. He leaned forward. Ms. Warden, I'm going to be blunt. We're making significant changes to this branch, effective immediately. Trevor Stark is being terminated today. 2 others will follow by the end of the week, pending final review of their involvement. My breath caught. This was happening faster than I'd anticipated. The remaining staff will undergo retraining and close supervision, he continued. But we need someone to oversee the transition, someone who understands both Centrix protocols and the specific challenges of this branch. He paused, watching my reaction. We'd like that person to be you. The words hung in the air between us. Me, overseeing the transition, leading the very team that had spent months trying to drive me out? I appreciate your confidence, I said carefully, but they'd never accept my authority. Not after this. Edward smiled. That's not your problem to solve. Their acceptance isn't required, only their compliance, or their resignation letters. Helena, who had been silently observing from the doorway, stepped forward. We need someone who understands what's broken and how to fix it. Someone who can't be manipulated or intimidated. You've already proven you're that person. I thought about what this would mean. Walking into this office every day, not as the outsider, but as the person in charge. Having actual authority to implement the changes I'd identified months ago. Watching Trevor's team, at what remained of it, adjust to the new reality. What exactly would the position entail? I asked. Interim branch director, Edward replied. 3-month appointment, after which we'd reevaluate. You'd report directly to Helena. full access to all systems, complete authority over local operations, and a salary adjustment to reflect the increased responsibility. My mind raced through the possibilities, the challenges, the potential satisfaction of turning this toxic environment into something functional. When would this start? I asked. Today, Helena answered. Right after we finish with Trevor. I nodded slowly. Then I accept. Edward stood, extending his hand once more. Welcome to senior leadership, Ms. Warden. At 8:30 a.m., Trevor arrived, clearly surprised to find his office occupied. The color drained from his face when he recognized Edward Barstow sitting behind his desk. Mr. Barstow, he stammered. I wasn't told you'd be. Have a seat, Mr. Stark, Edward interrupted, gesturing to the chair across from him. Trevor's eyes darted to me, standing quietly beside Helena near the window. Confusion furrowed his brow. What's she doing here? He asked, an edge of panic in his voice. Ms. Warden will be taking over as interim branch director, Edward stated flatly. Effective immediately. Trevor froze halfway into the chair. That's my position. Not anymore, Helena said. What followed was one of the most clinical terminations I'd ever witnessed. Edward laid out the findings from the initial audit. Misrepresented metrics, obstructed integration, altered reports, each violation corresponding to specific company policies. Trevor attempted several defenses, each weaker than the last. He claimed misunderstandings, blamed system limitations, suggested that cultural differences between the branch and headquarters had led to communication breakdowns. Edward let him talk himself into exhaustion before sliding a folder across the desk. Your termination package, he explained. You have two options. Option 1, sign the agreement, which includes 4 weeks severance and a neutral reference in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement and waiver of claims. Option 2, refuse to sign, in which case we proceed with termination for cause, no severance, and potential legal action regarding the financial discrepancies we've identified. Trevor stared at the folder as if it might bite him. This is because of her, he said, not looking up. She's turning you against me, against all of us. No, Mr. Stark, Edward replied evenly. This is because of you. The data speaks for itself. Ms. Warden simply made sure we saw it. Trevor finally looked at me, his expression a battlefield of emotions, rage, disbelief, fear, and underneath it all, a dawning recognition that he had catastrophically underestimated me. You'll regret this, he said quietly. All of you. Security will escort you to clear your desk, Helena informed him. You have 30 minutes. As Trevor was led away, Edward turned to me. Not everyone responds that poorly to accountability. The next conversations may go differently. They did, but only slightly. Audrey, confronted with specific evidence of her role in altering reports, dissolved into tears, claiming she was just following Trevor's instructions. Dylan attempted to downplay his involvement, insisting he wasn't aware of any impropriety. Penny and Milo, whose roles had been more peripheral, received formal warnings rather than terminations. By noon, Trevor and Audrey had been escorted from the building, their access badges deactivated. The remaining team members huddled in the break room, whispering anxiously among themselves. Edward departed for the airport with a firm handshake and a promise of his full support. Helena remained behind to help me establish my new authority. You'll face resistance, she warned as we walked the floor together. Not just from the remaining team, but from clients who were comfortable with Trevor's way of operating. Some may try to use this transition against you. I'm counting on it, I replied. She raised an eyebrow. You have a plan. I always have a plan. That afternoon, Helena called a full branch meeting to formally announce the leadership change. I stood beside her, watching the faces of my former tormentors as they realized the new power dynamic. Effective immediately, Valerie Warden will serve as interim branch director, Helena stated. She has full authority to reorganize operations, reassign responsibilities, and implement new protocols. Her decisions are backed by corporate leadership and are not subject to appeal. Silence greeted her announcement. Dylan stared at the floor. Penny chewed her lower lip anxiously. Milo kept swallowing hard, as if trying to force down panic. Additionally, Helena continued, over the next 2 weeks, each of you will participate in a comprehensive review of your work product and job performance. Ms. Warden will make recommendations regarding your continued employment based on these reviews. The message was clear. Their professional futures now rested in my hands. As the meeting dispersed, Helena pulled me aside. The next few days will determine the tone of your leadership. How do you want to handle it? I considered carefully before answering. I need to meet with each team member individually. Today, starting with Dylan. Dylan entered my new office, Trevor's old one, with the caution of someone approaching a wild animal. He perched on the edge of the visitor's chair, hands clasped tightly in his lap. "You wanted to see me," he said, a statement rather than a question. "Yes," I replied, studying the file open on my desk. "I've been reviewing the client reports you've managed over the past year. There's a pattern I'd like to discuss." Fear flashed across his face. "I can explain any discrepancies." I'm sure you can," I interrupted. "But that's not why you're here. I'm more interested in your analysis of the Westridge account, the one you completed last month." Confusion replaced fear. "Westridge? But that was just a standard renewal. Nothing special about it." "On the contrary," I said, turning the file toward him. "Your competitive analysis identified an opportunity to expand services that would increase annual revenue by nearly 30%. It was excellent work." He blinked rapidly, clearly thrown by the unexpected praise. "Oh, thank you. Why didn't you present it at the client meeting?" His gaze dropped. "Trevor said it was too aggressive, that we should wait until next quarter." "And what do you think? Was it too aggressive?" He hesitated, then straightened slightly. "No. Their new product launch presents a perfect opportunity for expanded digital services. Waiting puts us at risk of losing the business to competitors." I nodded. "I agree, which is why I've scheduled a meeting with Westridge for tomorrow morning. I'd like you to lead the presentation." His head snapped up. "Me? It's your analysis. You should be the one to present it." For a moment, he seemed unable to process what was happening. Then, cautiously, "What about the review? My job?" "This is part of your review," I explained. "I'm less interested in what you did under Trevor's leadership and more concerned with what you'll do under mine. Clear expectations, appropriate credit, and accountability for results. That's how we'll operate moving forward." By the end of the day, I'd had similar conversations with each team member. With Penny, I discussed her innovative client retention strategies that Trevor had dismissed. With Milo, I explored his technical skills that had been consistently underutilized. Each meeting followed the same pattern: acknowledgement of past work suppressed under Trevor's management, clarification of my expectations, and specific assignments to demonstrate their capabilities. They left my office confused but cautiously hopeful. It wasn't the retribution they'd expected. In fact, it looked suspiciously like a fresh start. That evening, as I prepared to leave, Dylan approached my desk. "I don't understand," he admitted. "You could have us all fired. Why aren't you?" I considered him thoughtfully. "Because that would be reacting to the past. I'm more interested in building the future." His expression suggested he didn't quite believe me, but he nodded anyway. "The Westridge presentation. I'll have it ready by morning." "I know you will." As days turned into weeks, a new pattern emerged in the office. The initial wariness gave way to tentative engagement. As team members realized, I meant what I'd said about clear expectations and appropriate credit. Client meetings became collaborative rather than competitive. Information flowed freely rather than being hoarded for leverage. Helena visited regularly, pleased with the transformation. "The numbers are already improving," she noted during her third visit. "Client retention up 12%, operational costs down 8%. The integration milestones are finally on track." "It's just the beginning," I assured her. Not everything went smoothly. Trevor, bitter about his termination, attempted to poach key clients. 2 actually left, citing relationship concerns with the new leadership. Audrey filed a complaint alleging unfair dismissal, though it was quickly dismissed given the evidence against her. Through it all, I maintained a steady course, professional, focused on results, and, most surprisingly to the team, fair in my assessments and decisions. 6 weeks into my interim role, Helena called with news. "The board is impressed with your performance," she said. "They want to make your appointment permanent, branch director with the corresponding title and compensation. What do you think?" "I'm honored," I replied, "but I need a few days to consider it." That night, alone in my apartment, I reviewed the journey that had brought me here. From the outsider, with a loser sign on her monitor, to the leader rebuilding a broken branch. It would have been easy to see this as the perfect conclusion, the ultimate vindication. But something felt unfinished. The next morning, I requested a video call with Helena and Edward. When their faces appeared on my screen, I knew what I needed to do. I've made my decision about the permanent position, I began. Edward nodded encouragingly. We're prepared to be quite generous with the compensation package. It's not about the money, I said. I've decided to accept on one condition. Helena leaned forward. Which is? Complete restructuring authority, I stated. Not just staff assignments or operational protocols. I want to redesign the entire branch function within the larger Centrix framework. They exchanged glances. That's a significant ask, Edward noted. What exactly do you have in mind? The regional branch model is obsolete, I explained. It creates unnecessary silos, encourages territorial behavior, and complicates integration. I propose dissolving the traditional branch structure entirely and creating specialized teams that work across regions. I shared my screen, displaying the organizational model I'd been developing since my first week at the branch, long before the Loser sign, before Helena's visit, before anyone realized I was paying attention. This approach eliminates redundancies, standardizes processes across all locations, and creates clear career advancement paths. I continued. Most importantly, it prevents the kind of isolated power concentration that allowed Trevor's situation to develop. Helena studied the model carefully. You've been planning this from the beginning. Not exactly, I admitted, but I recognized the structural problems almost immediately. They're not unique to this branch. They're built into the regional model itself. Edward stroked his chin thoughtfully. Implementation would be complex. There would be resistance from other regional managers. Yes, I agreed, but the efficiency gains would be substantial. I've projected a 27% reduction in operational costs company-wide within 18 months. And the existing team here? Helena asked. What happens to them? I smiled. That's the best part. The following Monday, I called a branch-wide meeting. The team gathered nervously, sensing something significant was about to happen. As of today, I announced, this regional branch no longer exists. Gasps and worried murmurs filled the room. Instead, I continued, we are becoming the pilot location for Centrix's new integrated operations model. Each of you will be transitioned to specialized roles within cross-regional teams based on your demonstrated strengths. I proceeded to outline the new structure. Dylan would head the strategic analysis team, coordinating with analysts across all locations. Penny would lead client relations, developing standardized retention protocols for the entire company. Milo would join the technical integration team, applying his previously untapped skills to system-wide improvements. These positions represent not just lateral moves, but significant promotions, I explained. You'll have greater authority, broader responsibility, and direct visibility with corporate leadership. Stunned silence gave way to cautious excitement as they processed the implications. Not termination, but elevation. Not punishment, but opportunity. Why? Penny finally asked the question on everyone's mind. After everything, why would you do this for us? And there it was, the moment I'd been waiting for since finding that neon green sticky note on my monitor. This isn't for you, I said quietly. This is for every person who's ever been underestimated, excluded, or labeled a loser because they didn't fit someone's idea of what belonging looks like. Understanding dawned in their eyes. You never wanted revenge, Dylan realized. You wanted change. No, I corrected him. I wanted both. I smiled as I delivered the final piece of my plan, the revenge they never saw coming. In the new structure, regional managers like Trevor become obsolete. The roles you're stepping into make his position not just unnecessary, but impossible to recreate. The system he built to protect himself and exclude others is being dismantled company-wide, replaced by one where success depends on collaboration rather than control. I let that sink in before continuing. The sign you put on my desk called me a loser, but in trying to push me out, you gave me the perfect vantage point to see what needed to change. My revenge isn't making you lose your jobs. It's transforming the entire company in ways Trevor fought against for years. It's creating a system where his tactics can never work again. The room fell silent as they grasped the full scope of what had happened. Their small act of cruelty had set in motion a complete reimagining of the company's operational structure. Their attempt to exclude me had given me the perspective to enact changes far beyond what any of them, including Trevor, could have imagined. So yes, I concluded, you can keep your jobs. Better ones, actually. But every day you come to work, you'll be participating in the system I designed. the living reminder that underestimating people is always a losing strategy. 3 months later, Helena visited to assess the pilot program's progress. The results had exceeded even my projections. Client satisfaction up 31%. Operational efficiency improved by 22%. Employee engagement scores at an all-time high. The board is implementing your model across all regions, she informed me. 2 other branch managers have already resigned rather than adapt to the new structure. I nodded, unsurprised. Trevor types don't thrive in transparent systems. Speaking of Trevor, she added, he's been trying to get consulting work with our competitors. No takers so far. Apparently, word has spread about his management style. I felt no satisfaction at his downfall, only relief that his approach was being recognized as the liability it always was. As Helena prepared to leave, she paused at my door. You know, most people would have used their position to punish those who hurt them. You used it to fix the system that allowed the hurt to happen. I smiled. Isn't that the best revenge? Not just winning the game, but changing the rules so no one else has to play it? Sometimes, the most powerful response to being labeled a loser isn't proving you're a winner. It's redefining what winning means. If you've ever felt underestimated or pushed aside, remember my story. The person they underestimate today might be redesigning their entire world tomorrow. Hit subscribe if you want more stories about turning obstacles into opportunities, and leave a comment sharing how you've transformed negative experiences into positive change. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting better. Well, look who finally decided to contribute something, my mother said as I placed the homemade apple pie on the dining table. The condensation on the wine glasses caught the chandelier light, creating tiny prisms across the white tablecloth. Though I don't know why you bothered when Clara brought that beautiful tiramisu from that fancy bakery downtown. My sister Clara beamed, her surgical residency badge still clipped to her designer blouse. Next to her, my brother Noah adjusted his custom cufflinks, fresh from winning another high-profile case that morning. It's the thought that counts, Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice light. I wanted to make something special for Dad's birthday. Oh, honey, Dad chuckled, not unkindly but with that familiar note of pity that made my stomach clench. Special is what your siblings bring to this family. You bring persistence. The table erupted in laughter, all except me. Speaking of persistence, my mother continued, refilling everyone's wine glass except mine. Clara just got offered chief resident position, and Noah's being considered for junior partner. That's amazing, I said genuinely. And what about you, sweetheart? Dad turned to me, his expression already prepared for disappointment. Still at that, what is it again? Office building downtown? Geospan International, I supplied, knowing he wouldn't remember it by next Sunday. Right. Still answering phones or whatever it is. I'm in operations management now, actually, I said quietly. Clara snorted into her wine. Is that what they call filing these days? Noah joined in. Hey, not everyone can handle the pressure of real responsibility. Someone's got to keep the coffee fresh. My mother patted my hand. There's nothing wrong with simple work, dear. We can't all be achievers. I stared at my untouched pie as they moved on to discussing Noah's latest courtroom triumph. 7 years at the company, and they still introduced me at family functions as our daughter who works in an office somewhere. 7 years of building something extraordinary that none of them could comprehend because they'd never bothered to ask. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Are we expecting someone else? My father asked, checking his watch. I invited my boss, I said, standing up. You always say I should bring someone from work. My mother's eyes lit up. Your supervisor is here? Why didn't you tell me? I would have made the good salmon. As I walked to the front door, I heard my father whisper loudly, maybe this supervisor can tell us what she actually does all day. I opened the door, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Ready for this? He asked quietly. I nodded. They've been ready for 7 years. They just didn't know it. Before I continue with what happened next, I want to thank everyone listening to this story. If you're enjoying it so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories like this one. Your comments mean everything to me, so let me know what you think as we dive deeper into what happened that night. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. My name is Maeve Riley, and until that night, I had been invisible to my own family. Not physically invisible, of course. They saw me at every excruciating Sunday dinner, but invisible in all the ways that mattered. I was 32 years old with a degree in international business that my parents had reluctantly helped pay for, convinced I'd never use it for anything substantial. I lived in a modest apartment downtown, drove a reliable but unimpressive car, and wore clothes that prioritized comfort over brand names. What my family didn't know, what I had been contractually prevented from telling them, was that 7 years ago when I started as an entry-level analyst at Geospan International, I had caught the attention of its founder, Walter Barnes. Walter was in his 70s then, a brilliant but eccentric businessman who had built Geospan from nothing into a global logistics powerhouse. 3 months into my employment, I had noticed a critical flaw in their Asia-Pacific shipping routes that was costing the company millions. Instead of submitting my analysis through normal channels, I stayed late one night and refined my findings into a comprehensive proposal. The next morning, I found Walter Barnes himself sitting at my desk, reading my report. "You wrote this?" he asked, not looking up. "Yes, sir. You're new." 3 months, I confirmed. He finally looked at me, his eyes calculating behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Do you know how many people have worked here for decades and never noticed this problem?" I didn't answer. "Come to my office at 7 tonight," he said, standing up, "and bring more ideas." That night began my unofficial apprenticeship. Walter kept me in the shadows, testing me with increasingly complex problems. I streamlined operations, revamped outdated systems, and developed innovative solutions that increased profitability by 38% within the first year. When Walter announced his retirement 2 years later, the board expected him to name his son or perhaps the CFO as his successor. Instead, he called me into a private meeting. "I'm naming you as CEO," he said without preamble. I nearly fell out of my chair. "Sir, there are dozens of more qualified." "No," he cut me off. "There's not, but there's a condition." The condition was secrecy. For at least 5 years, I would lead the company from behind a veil. My name would appear on documents as M. Riley, Operations Director, while I actually ran everything. Walter believed the board and industry weren't ready for someone like me, young, female, without an Ivy League pedigree. "Let your results speak first," he advised. "By the time they realize who's really in charge, your success will make it impossible for them to object." So I became the phantom CEO. In meetings, I sat quietly while others presented my ideas. I transformed the company from a traditional logistics operation into a technology-forward powerhouse. Revenue tripled. Our workforce grew from 3,000 to 15,000. And through it all, I told no one. Not my friends, not my siblings, and especially not my parents, who continued to see me as their underachieving daughter. Every Sunday, I sat through their dismissive comments and backhanded compliments. Each time Clara described a complex surgery or Noah detailed a legal strategy, my parents would beam with pride. Then they'd turn to me with those pitying smiles. "And how's your little job going, dear?" 5 years stretched to 7 as I navigated a merger that would make Geospan the largest company of its kind in the hemisphere. The day the deal closed, Walter called me. "It's time," he said simply. The transition happened quickly. At a board meeting, Walter announced his final act would be revealing the true identity of the company's leadership. Confusion turned to shock as he explained that for years, I had been the one making every major decision. The stock jumped 12 points that day. Industry publications ran headlines like "The Phantom CEO Revealed" and "Geospan's Secret Weapon Unveiled." My photograph appeared in business magazines. I was invited to speak at conferences and universities. And still, my family never noticed, because they never looked at the business section, never Googled my name, never asked about my work beyond the most superficial questions, until the night I opened the door and introduced Theodore Maxwell, the renowned business journalist, to my stunned family. "Everyone, this is Theo Maxwell. He's doing a feature on Geospan for International Business Monthly." My father's practiced host smile faltered. My mother dropped the serving spoon she was holding. "Maxwell? The Theo Maxwell?" Noah asked, instantly recognizing the name that appeared on the business profiles he pretended to read. Theo smiled warmly and extended his hand to my father. "It's a pleasure to meet Maeve's family. She's become something of a legend in our industry." "Our Maeve?" my mother asked, looking between us. "There must be some mistake." "No mistake," Theo said, accepting the seat I offered him. "Your daughter has revolutionized global logistics. That's why I'm profiling her as our Executive of the Year." The silence around the table was deafening. My father cleared his throat. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Maeve works at a desk job. She's not, Dad, I interrupted gently. I'm the CEO of Geospan International. Clara laughed nervously. That's not possible. Geospan is enormous. They're worth billions. 18.7 billion after the Astor merger last month. Theo supplied helpfully, which Maeve orchestrated, by the way. Masterfully done. My mother's hand flew to her throat. But you never said anything. Would you have believed me? I asked quietly. The room felt as if all the oxygen had been sucked out. My father's face had gone pale, his fork suspended midway to his mouth. Clara's perfect posture had crumbled as she slumped against her chair. Noah kept opening and closing his mouth like a fish out of water. I don't understand, my mother finally whispered. How is this possible? Theo glanced at me, silently asking permission to continue. I nodded slightly. Maeve was personally selected by Walter Barnes to succeed him, Theo explained, helping himself to the food my mother had robotically passed him. It's actually an extraordinary story. For 5 years, she ran the entire operation while maintaining a public facade as a mid-level manager. 5 years? My father echoed, his voice hollow. 7 now, I corrected gently. The board only learned my true position 2 years ago. Noah's legal mind seemed to click back into gear. That's insane. Why would anyone agree to that arrangement? Because Walter believed the company wasn't ready for someone like me, I said, finally cutting into my untouched dinner. He wanted my results to speak for themselves before revealing who was behind them. And speak they did, Theo added enthusiastically. Geospan's market value has quadrupled under her leadership. They've expanded into 17 new countries and revolutionized supply chain technology. It's why she's our cover story next month. Clara, always competitive, narrowed her eyes. If you're so important, why do you still drive that old car? Why don't you live in a mansion? I smiled. I invest most of what I earn back into employee development programs. Though I did buy a cabin in the mountains last year. It's quiet there. My mother suddenly stood up, nearly knocking over her chair. I need to check on dessert, she announced. Though dessert was already on the table, she practically ran to the kitchen. My father watched her go, then turned to me with a strange expression, something between anger and confusion. Why keep this from us? Your own family? The question hung in the air. Theo shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware he was witnessing something intensely personal. Maybe I should give you all a moment, he suggested. No, I said firmly. You're here to tell my story, Theo. This is part of it. I turned back to my father. I tried telling you, Dad. The first year, I mentioned 3 times that I had been promoted. Each time you changed the subject to Clara's medical school achievements. The second year, I brought home a company award. You used it as a coaster, Noah snorted, then quickly disguised it as a cough when our father glared at him. After a while, it just seemed easier to let you all believe what you wanted to believe. I continued. You had decided who I was a long time ago, and nothing I said was going to change that. My mother returned from the kitchen, her eyes red-rimmed but her smile firmly fixed back in place. So, she said with forced brightness, our Maeve is some kind of important businesswoman. How wonderful. Why, we always knew you had potential, didn't we, dear? She nudged my father. Of course, he agreed quickly. Always said you were smart as a whip. The blatant revision of history made my throat tighten. 7 years of dismissal, of condescension, of being the family disappointment, and now they were pretending they had supported me all along. Actually, Theo interjected, his journalist's instinct for truth apparently overriding his social graces. Maeve told me her family thought she was wasting her potential. It's part of what drove her, proving them wrong. A painful silence descended. Clara stared intensely at her plate. Noah suddenly became fascinated with his water glass. My parents exchanged panicked glances. Well, my father finally said, forcing a laugh. Families tease. It's what we do. Maeve always knew we were just having fun. I set down my fork with deliberate care. Did I? The atmosphere in the room shifted again. Theo, to his credit, recognized the tension and smoothly changed the subject. Maeve, tell them about the Patterson contract. That was brilliant strategy. Grateful for the lifeline, I launched into an explanation of a complex negotiation I'd handled the previous year. As I spoke, I watched my family's expressions transform. My parents' eyes widened with each figure I mentioned. Noah leaned forward, suddenly interested in my words. Clara's face tightened with what looked suspiciously like jealousy. By the time dessert was served, they were hanging on my every word. My father, who had never asked me a single question about my work in 7 years, now couldn't stop asking about market projections and expansion plans. "So what's your annual salary?" Clara finally blurted out, unable to contain herself any longer. I smiled. "That's private, but let's just say I'm comfortable." "More than a surgeon?" she pressed. "Clara!" my mother hissed, mortified. "It's a fair question," I said. "Yes, Clara. Significantly more than a surgeon, even a chief resident." Her face flushed red. Noah let out a low whistle. "But money isn't everything," I added quickly. "Your work saves lives. That's immeasurable." She didn't look comforted. As the evening progressed, I watched a painful realization dawn across my family's faces. They had been wrong. Catastrophically, embarrassingly wrong. For years, they had dismissed me, belittled me, written me off as the family underachiever. And all that time, I had been quietly building an empire. When Theo excused himself to take a phone call, my mother seized the opportunity to pull me aside in the kitchen. "Darling," she whispered urgently, squeezing my arm, "why didn't you tell us? We would have been so proud." The sincerity in her voice almost broke me. Almost. "Would you, Mom? Because when I told you I was handling international accounts 3 years ago, you said it was cute that my company let me play with the grown-ups." She flinched. "I never said that. Christmas dinner, 2019. Right before you asked Clara to explain brain surgery to the neighbors again." My mother's face crumpled. "We didn't know. You didn't ask." I corrected gently. "There's a difference." Back at the table, my father had cornered Theo and was speaking animatedly. As I approached, I caught fragments. "Always knew she had it in her. Encouraged her business degree. Family of achievers." Theo caught my eye over my father's shoulder, his expression a mixture of amusement and disbelief. "Mr. Riley was just telling me how supportive your family has been of your career," Theo said, his tone neutral but his eyes questioning. "Is that right?" I replied, keeping my voice light. My father turned to me, his expression earnest. "Absolutely. We always believed in you, Pumpkin. Remember how I helped you with those business school applications?" What I remembered was him asking why I was wasting money on business school when I didn't have the personality for corporate leadership. What I remembered was him suggesting community college instead. "I remember," I said simply. As the evening wound down, I noticed my siblings huddled near the front door, whispering intensely. They separated quickly when I approached. "Great night," Noah said too brightly. "Really eye-opening." Clara nodded stiffly. "Congratulations on your success." Their words were right, but something in their tone set off warning bells. I'd spent too many years in corporate negotiations not to recognize when someone was plotting something. "Thank you," I said cautiously. "It means a lot coming from both of you." As we said our goodbyes, my father pulled me into an unusually tight hug. "We need to talk more about your company," he said. "I have some ideas that might help you. And your Uncle Gordon is looking for investors for his new venture." I told him my successful daughter might be interested. Ah, there it was. "I'll keep that in mind," I said noncommittally. My mother kissed my cheek. "Next week, you must bring some of your important colleagues. I'll make my special lamb roast." "Actually," I said, "I'll be in Singapore next week. Board meeting." The disappointment on her face was tinged with something new. Respect. As Theo and I walked to our cars, he shook his head in wonder. "That was educational." "They really had no idea?" "None," I confirmed. "They never thought to look." "And now?" I glanced back at the house, where my family was still visible through the window, huddled together in what appeared to be an intense discussion. Now they'll never see anything else. What I didn't tell Theo was that the evening had unfolded exactly as I had anticipated. The shock, the disbelief, the rapid recalibration of their perception of me, it was all part of a plan that had been brewing for years. A plan that was only beginning to unfold. What I couldn't have predicted was the text message that lit up my phone as we reached our cars. "Family emergency meeting called for tomorrow. Topic: how to leverage Maeve's position. Dad says to keep it quiet from you. Thought you should know. Noah." I stared at the screen, an icy feeling spreading through my chest. So that's how it would be. My revealed success wasn't a cause for genuine pride. It was an opportunity to be exploited. "Everything okay?" Theo asked, noting my expression. I smiled tightly. "Everything's perfect. In fact, I think I'd like to expand the scope of our interview. There's much more to this story than I initially shared." Theo raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "It's about family," I said, "and what happens when they discover the person they've been stepping on has quietly risen above them all." The next morning dawned bright and clear. a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I sat in my corner office on the 37th floor, watching the city come alive below, while my phone buzzed incessantly with messages from my family. Just checking in on my successful daughter. Dad, lunch this week? So much to catch up on. Mom, hey sis, need advice on investment opportunities. Noah, can you introduce me to any hospital board members? Clara. I set the phone face down on my desk and turned to the window. The betrayal shouldn't have hurt, I'd expected it after all. But somewhere deep inside, a childish part of me had hoped their shock might transform into genuine pride, not this transparent attempt to cash in on my position. My assistant Yasmin knocked softly before entering with my morning coffee. The board reports are ready for review, and Mr. Maxwell is here for your follow-up interview. Thank you. Send him in. Theo entered, looking considerably more casual than he had at my parents' dinner party. He whistled appreciatively at the view. Nice digs. Very different from the cubicle farm you described starting in. I gestured for him to sit. 7 years is a long time. He pulled out his recorder. So, you wanted to expand our discussion? Yes. I took a steadying breath. I want to talk about what happens after the revelation, when the family that never believed in you suddenly wants a piece of what you've built. Theo's eyes lit with journalistic interest. Your family's already making moves? I showed him Noah's text from the night before. His eyebrows shot up. Family emergency meeting? That's something. Indeed, I sipped my coffee. What they don't realize is that I've been prepared for this moment for years. How so? I smiled. That's what I want to share. Over the next hour, I detailed my family's history of dismissing my achievements while elevating my siblings, how every milestone in my career had been minimized or ignored, how I'd stopped trying to impress them years ago and instead channeled that energy into building something they couldn't ignore. So the dinner reveal, that was deliberate? Theo asked. Every second, I confirmed. The timing, the witness, all of it. And what happens next? My phone buzzed again. Clara this time. Dad says you're not responding. We're all meeting at their house at 3. Really need you there. Important family matters to discuss. I showed Theo the message. Next is I attend their meeting and hear exactly what they have planned. Mind if I tag along? Off the record, of course. I considered his request. Having a witness might be useful. Actually, I'd prefer it be on the record. His eyes widened. Are you sure? Absolutely. I stood up, smoothing my blazer. This is part of the story too. At precisely 3 o'clock, I pulled into my parents' driveway with Theo beside me. My family's cars were already there, plus one I didn't recognize, a sleek black Mercedes with dealership plates. Expecting someone else? Theo asked. Apparently so. We rang the doorbell, and my mother answered, her smile faltering when she saw Theo. Maeve, darling, we weren't expecting company. Theo's with me for the day. Professional shadowing. I stepped past her into the living room, where I found my father, siblings, and an unfamiliar man in an expensive suit arranged like a war council. My father stood quickly. Pumpkin, there you are. This is Harrison Wells, a business associate of mine. The man extended his hand. Miss Riley, your father has told me remarkable things about you and your company. I shook his hand while examining him carefully. Interesting, considering my father only learned what company I run yesterday. An awkward silence fell. Harrison cleared his throat. Well, recent information then. Nonetheless, I believe we have a mutually beneficial opportunity to discuss. I sat down, gesturing for Theo to join me. I'm listening. My father took control, his car salesman charm in full force. Harrison runs Wells Financial Group. They're looking to expand their corporate client portfolio, and I mentioned that perhaps Geospan might be in the market for new financial services. We're very satisfied with our current financial partners, I replied. But surely you'd want to keep important contracts in the family circle, my mother interjected. Harrison is practically family. He and your father go way back. I turned to Harrison. How long have you been in business, Mr. Wells? He puffed up. 15 years this October. And your client list? Several mid-sized regional businesses. Your company would be our largest client by far, which means we'd give you our utmost attention. Translation. They had no experience handling accounts of Geospan's size and complexity. I smiled politely. I appreciate the offer, but we require partners with global capabilities and experience managing international portfolios. My father leaned forward. Maeve, this is a chance to help family. Harrison's company would grow with your business. Dad's invested quite heavily with them, Clara added meaningfully. Ah, now I understood. My father had money tied up in this small financial firm and was hoping to secure them a massive client to boost their prospects and his investment. I'm afraid corporate partnerships require board approval and extensive vetting, I explained. It's not something I can decide over coffee. Harrison's smile tightened. Of course. Perhaps I could submit a formal proposal? You're welcome to send it to our procurement department. I handed him a business card with our general inquiry email address. My father's face darkened. Procurement? Maeve, surely you can do better than that. Put in a good word with your board. That would be unethical, Dad. Noah jumped in. Speaking of your board, I've been thinking it might be time for me to explore corporate law. Geospan must need good attorneys. We have an entire legal department, plus outside counsel. Yes, but family you can trust, my mother said, patting Noah's hand. That's invaluable. Clara, not to be outdone, added, and I've been considering hospital administration long-term. Any healthcare initiatives at your company I might consult on? I looked around at their eager faces, all suddenly interested in my career. After years of dismissal, the familiar feeling of invisibility was gone, replaced by something almost worse, being seen only as a resource to be mined. Theo scribbled notes beside me, his expression carefully neutral but his eyes missing nothing. I need to be clear, I said finally. Geospan isn't a family business. We have processes for hiring, contracting, and partnerships that can't be circumvented because of personal connections. My father's facade cracked. After everything we've done for you, the education we helped pay for, the support we've given? Support? I repeated incredulously. We've always supported you, my mother insisted. We may not have understood your work, but we've always wanted the best for you. I looked at Theo. Are you getting this? He nodded, still writing. Getting what? My father demanded. What exactly is he writing? My story, I said simply. The complete version. Clara's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? It means I'm documenting how my family, who for 7 years treated me like an underachiever, is now suddenly interested in what I can do for them. That's not fair, Noah protested. We're just proud of you and want to be involved in your life. Involved in my company, you mean? Same thing, isn't it? My father said dismissively. Family helps family. That's how the world works. I stood up, suddenly tired of the charade. I need some air. Excuse me. Outside on the porch, I breathed deeply, trying to calm the anger and disappointment swirling inside me. I heard the door open behind me and turned, expecting Theo, but found Noah instead. That was pretty harsh in there, he said, leaning against the railing beside me. Was it? He sighed. Look, I get it. We underestimated you. But can you blame us? You never exactly screamed future CEO growing up. And Clara screamed future surgeon when she fainted at the sight of blood in 10th grade? That's different. She overcame that. And you don't think I overcame anything? The shyness? The anxiety? The constant comparison to my superior siblings? Noah had the grace to look uncomfortable. I never thought of it that way. No one in this family ever did. I turned to face him directly. That text you sent me last night, why did you do it? He shrugged. Seemed like you should know what they were planning. But you still came today. Still asked about jobs at my company. Can you blame me for trying? My firm is laying people off and suddenly my little sister runs a billion-dollar company. What would you do? I studied him. Of all my family members, Noah had been the least dismissive over the years. Not supportive, exactly, but not as actively condescending as the others. I'd have trusted that if my sibling thought I deserved an opportunity, they'd offer it without me having to scheme for it. Something shifted in his expression. Fair enough. He hesitated. For what it's worth, I am genuinely impressed with what you've accomplished. Not just the position, but keeping it quiet all these years. That took serious restraint. Thank you, I said, surprised by his sincerity. They're not going to stop, you know, he added, nodding toward the house. Dad's in financial trouble, bad investments, and Clara's in debt up to her eyeballs from medical school. They see you as the solution. I absorbed this new information. And you? Me? He smiled ruefully. I'm just the messenger. Always have been. When we returned inside, the atmosphere had shifted. My parents were huddled with Harrison, speaking in urgent whispers that stopped abruptly when we entered. Clara sat apart, aggressively typing on her phone. Everything okay? I asked. Wonderful, my mother said with brittle brightness. We were just discussing how we might celebrate your success. A family vacation, perhaps? Your father was thinking about that resort in Cabo you could probably get us into. I glanced at Noah, who raised his eyebrows in "and I told you so" expression. Actually, I said, I wanted to discuss something important with all of you. They perked up immediately. I've been thinking about family legacy, I continued, about what we leave behind and how we're remembered. My father nodded eagerly. Exactly. Creating a dynasty. That's what I've always wanted for this family. I was thinking more about truth and accountability, I countered, about acknowledging our past actions and their impact. My mother's smile faltered. What do you mean, dear? I turned to Theo. This is where that expanded story comes in. Back to my family. I've authorized Theo to include my full family background in his profile of me. What background? Clara asked suspiciously. The real one, how you all treated me for years. The dismissal, the condescension, the constant comparison. How none of you bothered to learn what I actually did until it benefited you to know. My father stood up abruptly. Now wait just a minute. You can't air family business like that. I'm not asking permission, Dad. I'm informing you. This is how you repay us? By embarrassing us publicly? My mother's voice trembled. It's not about embarrassment, it's about truth. About showing other overlooked people that success doesn't require family validation. Clara scoffed. So dramatic. No one's going to care about our family dynamics in a business article. They might care more than you think, Theo interjected. Family-related content consistently outperforms purely business content in our readership metrics. The color drained from my father's face. All my business associates read that magazine. Yes, I said quietly, they do. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. My family's social standing, my father's business reputation, Clara's professional image, all would be affected by the truth being published. You can't do this, my mother whispered. I already have. I stood up, gathering my things. The article runs next month. I wanted you to hear it from me first. As I headed for the door, Harrison awkwardly excused himself, clearly eager to escape the family drama. My father followed me outside, his earlier charm replaced by barely controlled anger. After everything we've done for you, he hissed, this is how you treat your family? I turned to face him. That's exactly the point, Dad. What have you done for me? Really? We raised you. We put you through college. You raised me to believe I was less than my siblings. You agreed to help with college only after I got a scholarship that covered most of it. And for the past 7 years, you've treated my career like it was a hobby to be tolerated. That's not true. It is true. And you know what's worse? Even now, you're not proud of me. You're not impressed by what I've accomplished. You're just calculating how to benefit from it. He fell silent, unable to deny the accusation. The article isn't about embarrassing you, I continued more gently. It's about being honest. About showing that success doesn't always look the way people expect, and that sometimes the person everyone underestimates is quietly building something extraordinary. And what about family loyalty? He demanded. Loyalty goes both ways, Dad. As Theo and I drove away, he let out a long, low whistle. That was intense. You okay? I was surprised to find that I was. The weight of 7 years of silence, of swallowing their dismissal, had lifted. Whatever happened next, the truth would be known. I'm fine, I assured him. This is just the beginning. Over the next 3 weeks, my family cycled through various strategies to prevent the article's publication. First came anger, furious calls and texts accusing me of betrayal. When that didn't work, they tried guilt. My mother tearfully recounting all she'd sacrificed for me over the years. Finally came negotiation, offers to publicly praise me if I'd soften the family portions of the article. Through it all, I remained firm. The truth would stand. The night before the magazine was set to go to print, I received a call from Noah. They're desperate, he said without preamble. Dad's calling in favors, trying to reach the magazine's publisher. It won't work, I replied calmly. The publisher is a woman I mentored 5 years ago. He laughed quietly. You really did think of everything. Not everything, just enough. There was a pause. For what it's worth, I get it now. Why you're doing this. Do you? Yeah, it's not about hurting them. It's about finally being seen. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment, looking at old family photos. Pictures of birthdays where my siblings got elaborate celebrations while mine were afterthoughts. Holiday gatherings where I sat on the periphery while Clara and Noah held court. Years of being overlooked, underestimated, dismissed. Tomorrow, that would end forever. The magazine hit newsstands on a Tuesday. My face on the cover, alongside the headline, The Invisible CEO, How Maeve Riley quietly built an empire while her family thought she was just pushing papers. Inside, Theo had crafted a masterful narrative. My professional achievements were detailed extensively, but woven throughout was the story of a family who failed to see what was right in front of them. He quoted my parents' dismissive comments, included anecdotes from those painful Sunday dinners, and contrasted their perception with the reality of what I was building. The article concluded with a section about that fateful dinner party and its aftermath, including my family's immediate pivot to trying to capitalize on my position. Their naked opportunism, laid bare for all to see. By noon, my phone was exploding with notifications. Industry colleagues, former classmates, distant relatives, all expressing variations of shock, admiration, and disbelief. My parents' phones, I imagined, were equally active, though for very different reasons. At precisely 1 o'clock, as scheduled weeks before, I took the podium at Geospan's annual shareholder meeting. Today, I began, I want to announce a new initiative that's deeply personal to me. The room fell silent, investors leaning forward in anticipation. For too long, talent has been overlooked because it didn't come in expected packages or follow traditional paths. Today, Geospan is launching the Visibility Project, a $50 million commitment to identifying and supporting overlooked talent within our organization and beyond. Applause rippled through the audience. The cornerstone of this initiative will be the Recognition Scholarship, full college funding for employees' children who demonstrate potential, but may be overshadowed by siblings or peers. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room is building the most remarkable future. As I detailed the initiative, I could see understanding dawning on the faces of those who had read the morning's article. This wasn't just a corporate program, it was my response to my own experience, my way of ensuring others wouldn't endure what I had. That evening, as I prepared for an interview about the new initiative, my assistant informed me my parents were in the lobby, insisting on seeing me. "Send them up," I said, steeling myself. They entered my office like chastened children, their usual confidence evaporated. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed, my father's shoulders slumped. "That article," my mother began, her voice trembling. "Everyone's read it, everyone." "That was the point," I replied calmly. "Your uncle won't even take my calls," my father said. "My golf buddies are suddenly too busy to play. Do you have any idea what you've done to our standing in the community?" "I told the truth, Dad, that's all. And this scholarship thing? That's just to rub it in, isn't it?" I sighed. "No, it's to ensure other overlooked people get the support I never did." My mother sank into a chair. "What do you want from us, Maeve? An apology? Fine. We're sorry. We didn't see your potential. We were wrong. Is that enough?" "This isn't about an apology," I said gently. "It's about consequences. For years, your words and actions had consequences for me. How I saw myself. How I navigated the world. Now your dismissal has consequences for you." "So that's it?" my father demanded. "You've had your revenge, ruined our reputation, and now we're just supposed to accept it?" I studied them both, these people who had shaped me in ways both painful and profound, who had never seen me, not really, until it was too late. "No," I said finally. "Now you have a choice." I outlined the conditions clearly. If they wanted to rebuild our relationship, they would volunteer with the Visibility Project, working directly with overlooked young professionals. They would attend therapy, both family sessions with me and individual counseling to address their patterns of favoritism and conditional love. And they would make public amends, not through hollow apologies, but through demonstrable changes in behavior. "And if we refuse?" my father asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Then you'll continue experiencing the natural consequences of having your true behavior exposed. People will know exactly who you are and how you treated your own daughter. Some may forgive that, many won't." As they left, visibly shaken by the choice before them, my assistant handed me a note that had been delivered by courier. "I was wrong. You were extraordinary all along. When you're ready to talk, really talk. I'm here. No schemes, no requests. Just your brother who missed seeing who you really were. Noah." I folded the note carefully and placed it in my desk. Perhaps there was hope for one relationship at least. That night, as I stood at my office window overlooking the city lights, I felt no triumph, no vindictive satisfaction, just peace. The truth was out. The invisible had become visible. The overlooked had been seen. My revenge wasn't destroying my family. It was ensuring they could never again pretend I was less than I am. It was forcing them to see, truly see, the daughter they had dismissed for so long. And it was creating a legacy that would help others like me rise without having to hide in the shadows. Sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't what you take from others, it's what you build for yourself and those who will come after you. If you've stayed with me through this story, thank you. Maybe you've felt invisible too. Maybe you've had people underestimate you, dismiss you, fail to see your potential. If so, I hope this reminds you that your worth isn't determined by others' ability to recognize it. Your value exists whether they see it or not. And someday, when you've built something they can't ignore, the look on their faces will be worth every moment they looked past you. Please share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know if any part of this resonated with you. And if you want more stories like this one, hit that subscribe button. Sometimes the quietest voices have the most powerful stories to tell. The envelope dropped onto my desk with a light tap. I looked up to see Aiden's face, tight smile, hands clasped behind his back. "We need you to read this now, Merritt," he said. I slid my finger under the flap, pulled out the single sheet of paper. The company letterhead sat atop a document titled Notification of Restricted Communication Protocol. The first paragraph stated in bold, "Effective immediately. You are prohibited from discussing any company-related matters with employees at any level." The paper vibrated in my hands. I set it down to hide the tremor. "Is this a joke?" I asked. "It's standard procedure when serious allegations are made," Aiden replied, his voice unnaturally even. "The investigation committee determined this was necessary until matters are resolved." "What allegations?" But I knew. Of course I knew. "I'm not at liberty to discuss that," Aiden gestured to the paper. "Please sign the acknowledgement at the bottom." 3 days earlier, I'd asked too many questions about a discrepancy I'd found while auditing the Asia-Pacific expansion accounts. $60 million that seemed to disappear into nothing. Now they were cutting me off completely. "And if I refuse to sign?" I asked. "Then we'll note your refusal and proceed accordingly." I picked up my pen, my mind racing through options. They thought this paper would silence me. They believed this corporate muzzle would make me disappear quietly. What they didn't know, I'd already made copies of everything, and I'd made a call. I signed my name with a steady hand. "There you go." Aiden took the paper, nodded once, and turned to leave. "Aiden," I called after him. He paused at the door. "Tell Penelope I said hello." His shoulders stiffened, almost imperceptibly. He knew what I meant. Penelope, our chief financial officer, who I'd noticed signing off on those mysterious transfers, who was now trying to bury me in corporate red tape. The door closed behind him. I opened my desk drawer and looked at my phone, the screen showing a message from an unknown number. "Package received. Meeting confirmed. 24 hours. I just needed to last 24 more hours. If you're feeling that twist in your stomach right now, you know something big is coming." Hit like and subscribe to hear how this corporate takedown unfolds. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. My name is Merritt Arlo. Until 3 weeks ago, I was a senior auditor at one of the largest investment firms in the country. Now I'm that whistleblower on the evening news. People often ask if I was scared. That's not quite the right word. When you discover your entire professional life is built on quicksand, fear isn't what you feel. It's more like waking up in a house you've lived in for years and suddenly noticing that all the doors lead to different rooms than they did yesterday. I wasn't always suspicious by nature. Growing up in a small town in Oregon, I trusted people. My parents ran the local hardware store. They taught me that numbers don't lie, even when people do. Balance your books, they said, account for every penny. I carried that lesson through college, through my accounting degree, through 10 years of climbing the corporate ladder. I believed in systems and processes. I believed in the guardrails of corporate governance. Then I found the first discrepancy. It was small, a $300,000 consultancy payment to a company I couldn't trace. In our world, that's practically a rounding error, but something about it nagged at me. The payment had been authorized on a Saturday at 2 a.m. Who approves payments in the middle of the night? I flagged it for my boss, Preston. He thanked me and said he'd look into it. 2 days later, the entry was gone from the system. No correction note, no explanation, just gone, as if it had never existed. That's when I started keeping my own records. For 6 months, I worked as usual during the day. At night, I traced money through our labyrinthine accounting system. I found more weekend approvals, more missing companies, more dead ends. Then I found the pattern. Every major transfer connected to our new Asia-Pacific headquarters, had a shadow. Money going out listed for construction, equipment, local permits, all the expected expenses for a major international expansion. But the amounts were inflated, sometimes by as much as 40%. The excess disappeared into a network of entities that existed only on paper. In total, $60 million, siphoned away over 18 months. I compiled everything into a report and requested a meeting with our CEO, Dante. His assistant scheduled me for a 15-minute slot on a Tuesday morning. When I arrived, Preston was there too, along with Penelope from finance. I hadn't expected an audience. Merritt, Dante gestured for me to sit. Preston says you have concerns about our APAC accounting. I placed my report on his desk. Not concerns, evidence. Preston's face remained neutral, but his fingers drummed once on his knee. A nervous tick, I'd noticed in budget meetings. That's a serious word, Dante said, not touching the report. It's a serious issue. I opened the folder, turned it toward him. $60 million has been diverted from the APAC project through falsified vendor payments. Penelope leaned forward. These are complex international transactions. Perhaps you're misinterpreting standard currency hedging practices. I'm not, I said. I traced the money. It's being laundered through a series of shell entities that all connect back to a holding company called Brightline Ventures. The room went silent. Dante and Penelope exchanged a look I couldn't interpret. May I see that? Preston asked, reaching for the report. I let him take it. He flipped through pages slowly, nodding occasionally as if considering my findings. Then he closed the folder. This is interesting work, Merritt, he said, but I think you're connecting dots that aren't there. International finance is complicated. Fraud isn't complicated, I countered. It's just hidden. Dante sighed. Let's not throw around words like fraud. That's a legal term with serious implications. I know exactly what it means, I said. And so do you. The meeting ended abruptly after that. They kept my report. I returned to my desk knowing I'd just lit a fuse, but unsure how long it would burn. The answer came 3 days later with Aiden and his envelope. What they didn't know then was that I'd expected this move. The night before my meeting with Dante, I'd sent copies of everything to my personal email. I'd also reached out to an old college friend who now worked for the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. As I sat at my desk after Aiden left, I knew the clock was ticking. The no-contact order meant I couldn't access the system anymore to gather additional proof. They would be closing ranks, covering tracks, preparing stories. But they had made one critical mistake. They let me keep coming to work. They thought keeping me isolated was safer than firing me outright and risking a wrongful termination lawsuit. They believed that without access to company systems and cut off from colleagues, I was neutralized. What they failed to consider was that I still had my eyes and my memory, and 24 hours until my FBI contact arrived with a warrant. I spent that day watching. Not obviously. I kept my head down, sorted through harmless paperwork, responded to emails about routine matters, but I observed everything. Penelope visited Dante's office 3 times. Preston disappeared for 2 hours after lunch. The IT director, Kit, was summoned upstairs and returned looking pale. Aiden kept glancing at my cubicle when he thought I wouldn't notice. At 3:17 p.m., a team from our data management department arrived on our floor. They set up at an empty desk cluster near the server room. Nobody announced why they were there, but I recognized the pattern from past projects. They were purging data. My stomach tightened. They were erasing the evidence faster than I'd anticipated. I took a bathroom break, locking myself in a stall to text my FBI contact. They're cleaning house? Timeline accelerated? The response came 5 minutes later. Hold position. Warrant processing. First thing tomorrow. Tomorrow might be too late. Back at my desk, I opened a spreadsheet and pretended to work while thinking through options. I needed insurance. Something to preserve crucial evidence until morning. At 4:45 p.m., Preston walked past my desk. He paused, then doubled back. Merritt, he said, voice artificially casual. Working late tonight? Just finishing some reports, I replied. Don't stay too long. Building maintenance is doing electrical work overnight. Systems might be unstable. Translation. Whatever you try to access after hours won't work. I smiled. Thanks for the heads up. After he left, I made a decision. It was risky, but I was out of alternatives. At 5:30 p.m., I packed my bag and headed toward the elevator, along with the first wave of departing employees. But instead of going down to the lobby, I pressed the button for the 14th floor, building operations. The maintenance department was nearly empty. Perfect. I walked confidently to the supply closet, found what I needed, and slipped it into my bag. Then I took the stairs down to the 12th floor, which housed an abandoned expansion project. The company had leased the space, but never finished building it out. I chose a spot behind some construction materials and settled in to wait. 6 hours until midnight. 9 hours until the FBI arrived. My phone buzzed. A text from Preston. Forgot to mention, security doing extra sweeps tonight. New protocol. They were looking for me. They suspected I hadn't really left. Had they seen me on security cameras? Were they tracking my badge access? I turned off my phone to prevent any location tracking. Hours crawled by. I heard security walking through twice, flashlights sweeping, but my hiding spot remained secure. At 11:45 p.m., I made my move. I crept up to the executive floor. Using the maintenance key I'd borrowed, I let myself in. The executive wing used a separate server system, one the data team downstairs couldn't access without authorization. If copies of the incriminating files still existed anywhere, they'd be here. Dante's office was locked, but the key worked there too. I slipped inside and closed the door quietly behind me. His computer required a password, but I wasn't after his machine. I pulled out the emergency backup drive from my bag, the one I'd taken from maintenance. These drives were kept ready, in case of system failure, containing mirror images of critical servers updated daily. The one I held had yesterday's complete data snapshot. I just needed to replace it with today's version, the one that would contain evidence of both the original fraud and today's cover-up attempt. As I moved toward the server cabinet, the office door opened. I had a feeling you might try something like this. Preston stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the hallway light. My breath caught. I'm just doing my job. Your job? He stepped inside, closing the door. Your job was to review accounts and flag issues through proper channels, not conduct private investigations. Proper channels? I almost laughed. You buried my report. I evaluated it and found it lacking. That's also my job. He moved closer, noticed the drive in my hand. What's that? Insurance. Something changed in his expression, a flicker of uncertainty. Merritt, you need to understand the bigger picture. The APAC expansion is bringing thousands of jobs to struggling communities. Yes, there are financial complexities, but the greater good— Stop, I cut him off. Don't pretend this is philanthropy. It's theft. It's business, he countered. Every major company operates in gray areas internationally. If we strictly followed every regulation across every jurisdiction, we'd never compete globally. Is that what lets you sleep at night? He sighed, suddenly looking tired. What do you want, Merritt? A promotion? A percentage? Name it. The offer hung between us. For a brief, disorienting moment, I saw the path he was offering. Advancement, wealth, belonging to the inner circle. All I had to do was forget what I knew. I want accountability, I said finally. His expression hardened. Then you'll get nothing. Because by morning, there won't be anything to account for. He reached for the drive in my hand. I stepped back, bumping into Dante's desk. A photo frame fell, glass shattering on the floor. Preston lunged. I ducked away, but he caught my arm. The drive fell from my grasp, skittering across the floor. The office door swung open again. Light flooded in. What's happening here? Penelope stood in the doorway, eyes darting between us. Preston straightened. Our auditor was doing some after-hours exploring. Penelope's gaze found the drive on the floor. Her lips thinned to a line. This is disappointing, Merritt, she said, though not surprising. Security reported your badge never left the building. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling security. This is trespassing at minimum. It's evidence gathering, I corrected her, for the federal investigation that begins tomorrow morning. Her finger paused over the screen. What investigation? The FBI will be here at 9 a.m. with warrants for all financial records related to the APAC project and Brightline Ventures. Preston's face drained of color. You're bluffing. Call security, I suggested. Have me escorted out. File charges. Make a big scene. It'll give the agents plenty to ask about when they arrive. Penelope and Preston exchanged looks. I could almost see the calculations running behind their eyes, weighing risks, considering options, searching for the scenario where they emerged unscathed. Perhaps we're being hasty, Penelope said finally, lowering her phone. I agree, Preston added. Merritt, let's discuss this reasonably. Whatever you think you found, I'm sure we can clarify. The sudden shift to conciliation was almost comical, almost I found $60 million being siphoned through fake vendors, I said. What's there to clarify? Context, Penelope insisted. You're missing crucial context. Then enlighten me. Preston gestured toward Dante's small conference table. Let's sit. Talk this through. It was a delaying tactic, but I decided to play along. Every minute they spent trying to convince me was a minute they weren't destroying more evidence. We sat. They talked. They spun elaborate explanations about international tax strategies, about competitive necessity, about regulatory arbitrage. Their words flowed like water, plausible, smooth, practiced, and utterly false. As they talked, I noticed something. Penelope kept glancing at her watch. Every few minutes, like clockwork. She was waiting for something, or someone, which is why those transfers might appear irregular to someone without visibility into the full strategy. Preston was saying, You see, Merritt, this is exactly why these matters should be escalated properly. Jumping to conclusions. What time is it, Penelope? I interrupted. She stiffened. What? You've checked your watch 8 times in 20 minutes. Are you expecting something to happen? The conference room door opened before she could answer. Dante walked in, followed by 2 men I didn't recognize. One carried a laptop bag. Merritt, Dante said, his voice carefully neutral. Working late, I see. We all are, I replied. He nodded to the strangers. These gentlemen are from our data security team. They need to examine your devices and accounts for potential breaches. The trap became clear. They would discover that I had stolen or fabricated data. They would make me the criminal. No, I said simply. It's not a request, Dante replied. It's company policy for suspected data theft. I don't work for you anymore. I stood up. I quit, effective immediately. Preston started to speak, but Dante held up a hand to silence him. That's your right, Dante said, but you still can't leave with company property. I don't have any company property. The backup drive. I glanced at the drive still lying on the floor near the desk. I never touched it. Check your cameras. The man with the laptop stepped forward. We'll need to verify that and examine your personal devices to confirm no data was transferred. You need a warrant for that, I said, not for company-owned equipment in a company building. My phone and laptop are personal property. That's for legal to determine, Dante said. In the meantime, we have a responsibility to secure our systems. They were stalling, creating a paper trail, building their defense. The realization hit me like cold water. They weren't worried about the FBI anymore. Something had changed. What changed? I asked, studying Dante's expression. An hour ago, these two were panicking about the FBI arriving tomorrow. Now you're all calm and methodical. Why? A small smile flickered across Dante's face. Let's just say we've been in touch with some friends who assure us your concerns will be handled appropriately. The implications settled like lead in my stomach. They had connections, the kind that could derail an investigation before it began. You made a call, I said. Several, Dante replied. It seems your FBI contact isn't as highly placed as you might have hoped. Was he bluffing? I couldn't tell. My contact had been confident about the warrant, but I knew how these things worked. One call from the right person could delay action, reroute priorities, create bureaucratic obstacles. The man with the laptop opened it, fingers flying across the keyboard. I need access to the server cabinet, he told Dante. Of course, Dante produced a key from his pocket. While they were distracted with the cabinet, I weighed my options. If they had indeed managed to block the FBI raid, I needed a new plan. If they were bluffing, I just needed to stall until morning. Either way, I couldn't let them fabricate evidence against me. I want to call my lawyer, I announced. Preston laughed. At 1 a.m.? Yes, right now. That seems reasonable, Dante said, surprising me. Use my office phone. Another trap. They'd record the call, gather intelligence on my legal strategy. I pulled out my personal cell instead. I'll use mine. No outside devices until we've secured the data, the second stranger said, stepping toward me. I stepped back. Don't touch me or my property, Penelope cut in, her voice suddenly conciliatory. Everyone calm down. Merritt, we're not trying to prevent you from calling counsel. We just need to follow protocol for data security. Then I'll step outside to make my call. I'm afraid we can't allow you to leave until this matter is resolved, Dante said. Security protocol. So I'm being detained? Of course not. You're free to leave once we've secured company data. It was a standoff. They couldn't physically force me to comply without creating a much bigger legal problem. But they could prevent me from leaving. claim I was trying to remove company property. A new approach formed in my mind. You know what? You're right, I said. All four of them looked surprised. I am? Dante asked. Yes, data security is important, and I have nothing to hide. I set my phone on the table, careful to press the emergency sauce button as I did. It would silently start recording audio. Go ahead and check. You won't find any company files. The technician picked up my phone. Password? I gave it to him. I had nothing incriminating on the device. I'd been too careful for that. What I did have was now a recording of everything happening in this room. For the next hour, they combed through my phone and personal laptop. As expected, they found nothing. No files, no emails, no messages about the company. Satisfied? I asked when they finally finished. For now, Dante said, but we still need to understand why you were in my office after hours. I told you, I suspected you were erasing evidence of financial crimes. I came to preserve that evidence for the authorities. By breaking into secured areas? The door was unlocked. I lied. They couldn't prove otherwise. I'd put the maintenance key back in my pocket. Preston jumped in. This is getting us nowhere. Merritt, be reasonable. Whatever you think you've found, there's an explanation. We can work this out professionally. I'm listening. We'll form a special audit committee. You can present your concerns formally. We'll bring in independent reviewers. While you continue erasing the evidence? No one is erasing anything, Penelope insisted. I gestured toward the technicians. Then what are they doing? Standard security protocols, Dante said. Nothing more. The conversation circled like this for another hour. They offered compromises, explanations, assurances. I refused to budge. The clock ticked toward morning. At 3:17 a.m., Dante's phone rang. He answered, listened, then hung up without speaking. There's been a development, he said. It seems we have visitors in the lobby. My pulse quickened. The FBI? Already? Local police, he continued, dashing my hope. Someone activated an emergency alert from this room. They're responding to a possible hostage situation. All eyes turned to my phone on the table. The recording app was still running, visible on the screen. You called the police on us? Preston's voice rose in disbelief. I didn't call anyone, I replied truthfully. The SOS feature activated automatically when I felt threatened. Dante's face darkened. You've crossed a line, Merritt. No, you crossed it when you stole $60 million and tried to silence me. He picked up his desk phone. Security, please escort our police visitors to the executive floor. Tell them there's been a misunderstanding. Within minutes, 2 uniformed officers arrived. I recognized immediately they weren't standard patrol officers. Their uniforms were too crisp, their demeanor too polished. Private security, wearing police-like uniforms. Everything all right here? The taller one asked, addressing Dante. Yes, just a workplace misunderstanding, Dante replied smoothly. Miss Arlo accidentally triggered her phone's emergency feature during a late meeting. The security guard looked at me. Is that accurate, ma'am? This was my chance. Real police would have asked to speak with me separately. These men were part of the company's web of influence. No, I said firmly. I'm being detained against my will, after discovering financial crimes. The guards exchanged glances. She's under considerable stress, Penelope explained. We were just trying to follow data security protocols. I understand, the guard said. Perhaps we should continue this conversation downstairs. Excellent idea, I agreed, standing quickly. The guards led us to the elevator. As the doors closed, I noticed Dante typing something on his phone. The guards positioned themselves on either side of me. The elevator descended to the lobby. When the doors opened, I expected to see more security personnel waiting. Instead, 3 men and a woman in suits stood in formation. The woman held up a badge. FBI, nobody move. The shock on Dante's face was worth every tense moment of the night. Agent Tess Harper, the woman introduced herself. We have a warrant to search these premises and seize all financial records related to your Asia-Pacific expansion project. There must be some mistake, Dante began. No mistake, she replied. We've been building this case for months. Your auditor's evidence was just the final piece we needed. Understanding dawned on Dante's face as he turned to me. Months? You weren't the initial source? I smiled for the first time that night. I guess I wasn't the only one who noticed those weekend transfers. The FBI team moved with practiced efficiency, securing the building, isolating key executives, beginning the evidence collection process. I was escorted to a conference room where Agent Harper took my statement. You took a huge risk staying here tonight, she said when we finished. I was afraid they'd destroy everything before you arrived. They tried, she confirmed. But we had inside help. Someone mirrored the servers to an external location weeks ago. Who? She smiled. That's confidential, but they'll be well protected under whistleblower statutes. By sunrise, the truth emerged in fragments. The Asia-Pacific expansion had been legitimate, but Dante and several board members had inflated costs and diverted the excess funds. Penelope had managed the money movement. Preston had buried audit flags. The scheme had tentacles throughout the executive team. And someone else, someone I still didn't know, had been gathering evidence long before I stumbled onto the trail. As morning light streamed through the lobby windows, I watched Preston being escorted to a waiting vehicle, hands cuffed behind his back. Penelope followed a minute later, her composure finally cracking as cameras flashed from news vans across the street. Agent Harper approached, holding my phone and laptop. These are clear. You can take them now. Thank you. We'll need you to testify eventually, she said. And there's paperwork for whistleblower protection. I understand. She hesitated, then added, Someone wants to meet you. They're waiting outside. Curious, I followed her through the lobby doors. A car idled at the curb, tinted windows concealing its occupant. The back door opened as I approached. Inside sat Kit, our IT director, the same Kit who had been summoned upstairs yesterday and returned looking pale. Get in, Kit said. We should talk. I slid into the seat beside them, questions forming on my lips. I've been tracking the money for 14 months, Kit said before I could speak. Ever since they made me set up the separate server system for executive use only. I knew they were hiding something. You were the other whistleblower. Kit nodded. I needed someone with financial expertise to verify what I was seeing. Someone with access and integrity. So you made sure I was assigned to audit the APAC accounts. Yes. And you did exactly what I hoped. You found the pattern. The pieces clicked together. You were monitoring my searches. You knew what I'd discovered. I had to be sure you weren't part of it before I approached you. Then you went directly to Dante, and things accelerated. Why didn't you come to me after that? Kit's expression darkened. Because I saw what they were planning to do to you. The no-contact order was just the beginning. They were building a case to frame you for the very crimes you discovered. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place. You called the FBI yesterday, not me. Your friend at the FBI was real, Kit confirmed, but they diverted her call. The Bureau has been investigating for months through different channels. I just made sure they knew to move immediately. The magnitude of what we'd accomplished washed over me. $60 million recovered. A dozen conspirators facing charges. A corruption scheme exposed. What happens now? I asked. Kit handed me a business card. That's my lawyer. She specializes in whistleblower cases. The company will try to discredit us, but we have the evidence and the truth. Through the windshield, I watched as Dante emerged from the building, flanked by agents. His eyes found our car, narrowed briefly in recognition, then looked away. They never imagined we'd fight back, did they? I said. No, Kit replied. That was their biggest mistake. If you've ever felt powerless against a system bigger than yourself, remember this. Truth has a way of coming to light. One voice becomes two, becomes many. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of justice served. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever stood up against corruption? Your story matters too.